misapprehension, holding in imagination the condition of actuality to be other than it actually is. Coming to directly and clearly experience this condition as it is completely resolves this problem. It happens that this is possible and can be easily effected by means of the yoga of radiant presence. Experience appears without mechanism, essentially miraculously, directly. Its nature and qualities entirely transcends conceptualization, explanation, abstract modeling, etc. Experience itself is entirely inclusive of reality. Any and all actuality entirely consists of this. It alone exists. Look for yourself and see that this is so. And by the way, we will. I'm just reading through this once. I'll be spending some time on this, so don't worry if some of it, doesn't click or whatever. This being the case, then what it is and the way in which it is in actuality what every and anything that appears to exist in it actually is in entirety. Notice that the apparition of experience is complete in that apparition. No subsequent apparent process is anything other than more apparition itself. In actuality, apparition alone is the sole event, action, substance, mechanism, process, and condition, completely inclusive of any substance, objects, action, qualities, structure, and mechanism that may seem to be apparent. Notice that appearance is spontaneous, uncontrollable, instantaneous, leaving no residue whatsoever. Notice that appearance in any perspective is entirely unanalyzable, indescribable, unmodelable, not susceptible to accurate, precise description or definition whatsoever. Notice that every aspect of experience is precisely what it is, and the way that it is, even though what that is cannot be defined with accuracy or precision. Notice that experience is a single fact, and that all the infinite apparent aspects of this fact have no independent existence, or indeed even findability, other than as this fact alone. Space, time, action, consciousness, perception, cause-effect, aliveness versus inanimation, doership, multiple separate entities and beings, etc., etc., etc. In short, all conditions that are held within human consensus reality to constitute the ingredients of our lives cannot be found except as absolutely transcendental implications of this one fact condition. Notice that you, your being, your consciousness perception, although actual, cannot be isolated or found as partialities within this infinite field of experience. Since these conditions as such are self-validating actualities, they are this itself, and in this obvious perspective will be noticed to permeate the entirety of this actuality. And yet, even though all normal modes of grasping or analyzing this actuality fail utterly, i.e., it cannot be found as being anything in particular in analytical terms, it is actual. It is intrinsically a positivity. It is not made up of negating anything, but is on the contrary the positivity of which any and everything whatsoever actually consists. And this being so, intrinsically negates, disproves in themselves the things and conditions that seem to populate experience leaving only itself. This actuality can meaningfully be referred to as present, since it self-verifyingly is, even though what and how that is the case is intrinsically inscrutable, and as radiant, in that it spontaneously presents as infinitely differentiated, infinite fields of experiential characteristics, even though these characteristics cannot be found, isolated, or analyzed. So this single actuality of radiant presence, which inherently includes all of reality, by its nature engages with itself to produce the phenomena of your life. This self-engagement that your experience consists of can be called a yoga. And ceasing to hold your experience as being anything other than this transcendental engagement of radiant presence with itself reveals your experience as this, the eternal, ongoing yoga of radiant presence and nothing else. So what does that mean? Wow. We'll come back to the opening quote a little later. So, the first paragraph. The sole spiritual problem is misapprehension, holding in imagination the condition of actuality to be other than it is. Okay, here's actuality, right? This is real. This is real happening. This is really here, right? This is actuality. Now, if you think you know what it is, you're wrong. Not because you're stupid, not because you're don't have a lot of experience and subtlety and so on and so forth, but because what this is intrinsically unable to be accurately analyzed, accurately described, accurately conceived of, accurately mapped, and so on and so forth. It just happens to be that what this is infinitely subtle and all that, and we'll go in great detail into what that actually refers to. And yet, the human condition is we think we know something. We kind of think we know, well, this is my life, and I'm trying to do this, and I'm trying to do that, and I like this, and I don't like that, and I'm, in the human condition, we're in this horrible political situation, the global condition is this, and ecological, we think we know things, all the information, all the facts and figures. It's all completely inaccurate. And inaccurate is a euphemism for wrong, not true, not real. What is real, what is actually the case right here, is completely beyond anything anyone has ever thought. Not because, again, everyone's stupid, although there may be a certain amount of that going around, who knows, but because what this is intrinsically is not graspable in those terms. It cannot be known, it cannot be described, it cannot be mapped, it cannot be modeled. And yet, typically as humans, we don't notice that fact. We think we know something. We think we have a handle on things. We think we know this is this and that is that. To whatever we do. And of course, you have your own personal familiarity with this and the way other people seem to behave and so on that may seem to imply something along these lines. But this is a problem, not because it doesn't kind of work. I mean, obviously we've all been doing it all our lives, and here we are, right? So it kind of, it's kind of functional in a way. And yet, it completely cuts one off from appreciating what this really is, what you really are, what's really going on here, which turns out to be absolutely astounding and profound, and a vastly different implication of across the board of what's happening here. So, now, coming to directly experience this condition as it is completely removes this problem. How nice. And it happens that this is possible. Wow. Even nicer still. And this this engagement that we're going to be playing with over the next couple of days that I call Yoga of Radiant Presence is one way to do that. So when you come to see through, or let's say see the inaccuracy of the ways that you're used to thinking and believing of this actuality, of yourself and your situation, the world, reality. I mean, we're talking about the real thing here, the whole shebang. When you come to directly see that your ways of thinking of it are wrong and it is beyond them, and yet, even though it is beyond them, you have the capability of seeing that, of knowing that very profoundly, because what you are is what it is, so you are beyond the ways you think you are too. You're much more than you can think you are. This coming to see this fact, coming to know this fact directly and profoundly, which is actually quite easy to do relatively, essentially completely solves the problem of, what in spiritual technical terms is called delusion. Thinking you know what the world is erroneously. In other words, it is possible to discover what is really going on here, what you really are, what this really is. You won't be able to say what that is. You won't be able to describe what that is, because as we'll get into later, it turns out it's entirely beyond describability, beyond modelability, beyond capturing accurately in abstract conceptualization, and so on. But that turns out not to be an issue, turns out not to be a problem, because you are also, what you are and your functioning is also entirely beyond describability, beyond modeling, beyond conceptualization. So you are what it is, and what you are can know directly what it is, even though it is fundamentally irrational. And this is possible. It can be done, and there is at least one, if not infinite numbers of modes to come to this direct perception, this direct understanding. Just an overview. What is this that's going on here? Okay, this is experience, right? Experience, right? Anyone here not having experience? Anyone for whom it's not self-evident that experience is happening, whatever that means? I mean, here it is. This is experience, right? So, experience appears without mechanism. What's doing this? It's not like there's some movie projector somewhere outside your experience that's shining it in that you have any access to or whatever. It's just, here it is. It's like, bang, poof, magic. It may as well be some magician waving his wand or some god on Olympus or whatever, just like poof. And here it is. It really is here. This is actually here. It appears without mechanism, essentially miraculously. Well, directly. It appears unmediatedly. This is its apparition, and there's no stages of it. Sort of ramps itself up to appearing, and then it sort of squeezes out a moment of apparition, right? It's just like, bang, here it is, effortlessly, bang, completely nakedly, completely direct presence of experience, right? Its nature and qualities entirely transcends conceptualization, explanation, abstract modeling, etc. And we touched on that, and of course we'll be going to be going back into that in many aspects and many, many times over the next few days. You can't say what this is. Here's experience. It's right here. It's obvious. It's like you can check it out. You can examine it up close and personal, right? What is it? Well, it's here. Okay, it's here, right? Or here is it, maybe. But you start trying to get precise about trying to pin down exactly what it is, or how it is, or it turns out absolutely anything whatsoever about it, and all of a sudden, you can do it effortlessly as long as you're content with being not too precise, as long as you're content with just averaging things out. Well, it's kind of like this, and it's like that, and it's like this. Well, this is this, and that's that. we throw all these words and names and adjectives around as if they really hit the nail on the head, but they're all approximations. If you want to really go to the thing itself, what is it really? You get to a point where, well, gosh, it's not really this way, and it's not really this, and it's not. And you can spend the rest of time doing that, and you'll still be, well, it's not really this way, it's not really that way. But here it is. So this is about your experience. Your experience is right here. This is what all the fuss is about. Experience is entirely inclusive of reality. So there's nothing outside your experience. Try and find something outside your experience, right? I mean, where are you going to look? Obviously, that's just not going to happen. I can say, but I can go to these subtle vibes. But if I'm going to these subtle vibes, I'm experiencing them. So experience doesn't have any a priori limits on what it is or what it can appear as. But anything that is actual is an actual experience, in fact, if you look and see. And try and find if that's true for yourself. Look for yourself and see. Can you find anything that actually is, that is not actually an experience or experience? And, don't worry about, on any of these points, don't worry about having to, totally nail it down. Just we'll be surfing through this stuff over the next 2 days. And it's got a lot of nuance, shall we say. So that's included. Any and all actuality entirely consists of this actuality that is here. There's no actuality outside this actuality. There's no other actuality. There's no other reality over there somewhere outside of this one. I mean, there may or may not be, but you can't know. So, in point of fact, in pragmatic terms, this is it, right? And if there's any it, it's always going to be this. It's always going to be this is it. It's never actually going to be that's it, because that will just be some subtle restatement of this, your experiential field. It alone exists. Look for yourself and see that this is so. This being the case, then what it is, what this is, and the way in which it is, the way it is what it is in actuality what every and anything that appears to exist in it actually is in entirety. So this is experience, and it is the way it is. Even though we can't say what it is the way it is. It's real. It is this, that is the way this is, right here, right now. This is experience. Right? This is experience. This is experience. This is experience. This is experience. So it all presents itself in all of these apparent guises that we're all used to slicing and dicing and being experts on what's different about them, which is all fine, and they are, of course, infinitely differentiated. But they're all actually the same thing. They're all experience. You go to sleep, well, it's simpler. You close your eyes, and everything in the visual field disappears instantly. Right? It doesn't disappear a piece at a time. It's not like you disappear, and then you disappear, and then this cup disappears, and that cushion disappears, and that piece of wood disappears, and this computer disappears. It's not like that, is it? It's like, poof. It all shuts off. Poof. It all opens up. It's of a piece. Your visual field is one thing. Right? Oh, it's infinitely differentiated. I mean, there's all of these, obviously, all these characteristics, which we're so used to obsessing about and focusing on as humans. But in actuality, all of this differentiating that we're so expert at may blind you to the fact that it's all really the same thing. Think of a dream. Okay, you can be in your bed dreaming at night, And you can be, all sorts of stuff can be happening, right? You can be walking down the street and talking to people and flying, and planes can be flying. I mean, anything can happen, right? It's a dream, right? All this stuff's appearing. And yet, there's absolutely nothing actually present but dream. It's all just dream. All the stuff is just an imputation of stuff. It's a claim that, there's all this stuff here, there's all these things here, there's all this stuff happening. There's only one thing happening, and that is dreaming. There's only one thing happening here, and that is experiencing. That is the sole verb. And experience is the sole noun. So this is experience, and its action is experiencing, or you can say appearing, right? This, experience appearing, experience appearing, experience appearing, experience appearing, right? It's all the same thing happening in the same way in actuality. And we'll get into all the fact that, but what about, and what about, and what about. Let's see. So anything that appears to exist in it actually is it in entirety and nothing else. So, next paragraph. Notice that the apparition of experience is complete in that apparition. In other words, here's the present moment. Poof! Everything's included. Everything comes with. There's nothing left out. There's nothing that needs to be added in. And it's not like you need to experience this and then add that and add that and add that and add that and add that. And okay, now everything's here. It's not like that, is it? Just in the absolute real-time instant, bang, here it is. All just completely present. Right? So notice that the apparition of experience is complete in that apparition, the apparition of this moment, always this moment. No subsequent apparent process is anything other than more apparition itself. So, here's a bottle cap. I drop the bottle cap, hits the floor, it makes a noise. The bottle cap appearing is an apparition. Me letting it go is an apparition. It falling is an apparition. It hitting the floor is an apparition. The noise is an apparition, experientially. There's not like one thing led to another. Each one appeared in the moment, experientially. So experience appears in the moment complete. So the moment at which the bottle cap hits the floor and you hear the noise, that's a complete moment. It's not dependent upon anything else. It is, everything is there. And it is actually independent of the fact of whether or not I ever held it, whether or not it ever fell, whether or not it comes to rest and sits there afterwards. Just that moment is. And that isness, that apparition, is the whole shooting match, is the entirety of the event. So the only thing that's actually happening here is the appearance of the present moment. And all apparent conditions, all apparent mechanism, all apparent entities, all apparent subsystems and functioning is just ways of spin doctoring this one fact. This one continuous fact of here is the moment of your experience completely. Bang, here it is. Always, right? It's always here. It's always this. And everything comes with. And the everything isn't anything other than this apparition. So in actuality, apparition alone is the sole event, action, substance, mechanism, process, and condition, completely inclusive of any substance, objects, action, quality, structure, and mechanism that may seem to be apparent. So, the wood is over there in the fireplace, and it's burning and it's crackling away, and the flames are going up the chimney and it's radiating heat. All of that is just apparition. There's nothing extra there. It's not like there's apparition and then the wood is there. There's apparition and then it's burning. The wood being there is apparition. The burning is apparition. The flames going up the chimney is apparition. The hearing crackling is apparition. It's the apparition of experience. And So it's not that the wood burns and then the burning makes heat. Wood appears, burning appears, heat appears, crackling appears. So notice that appearance is spontaneous, uncontrollable, instantaneous, leaving no residue whatsoever. Okay, so here's your experience in the present moment. Right now, you're experiencing exactly what you happen to be experiencing. You're seeing exactly what you happen to be seeing. Very specifically. It's not vague at all. It's very precisely exactly what you happen to be seeing, hearing exactly what you happen to be hearing, thinking exactly what you happen to be thinking, feeling exactly what you happen to be feeling, so on and so forth. Just like a snapshot of the present moment, bang, it's all there in that moment. Is there any planning? Is there any, ramping up to being what it is? Do you know what exactly what you're going to experience in the next moment? In any moment? In this moment, do you know what you're experiencing even, So it's just poof, it just appears. It's all here. And after the fact, you can kind of sit and think, well, gosh, all this stuff's going on, and there's this and that and the other, and make a big list of, all the stuff that is present in the experiential field and all that. But in the actual apparition, it's just bang, it's spontaneous. It's unpremeditated. It doesn't have to ramp itself up. It doesn't have to have a lot of preconditions. It's just in the instant, it's just there, proof. Think of a dream again. When you dream, what are you going to dream? You're going to dream exactly what you are dreaming in that moment. It's doing itself in real time. It's making itself up. It's just bang. It's just right there. And this is always the case with experience. You're always experiencing exactly what you're going to experience. You can't control what you're going to experience. You don't know exactly what your eyes are going to rest on in the next moment. You don't know exactly what thought you're going to think in the next moment. I can say, oh, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say. But in actuality, it's all just popping into my mind in real time. And I can kind of feel like I'm participating in that and feel like I'm kind of, riding herd. But if I look really closely on that phenomenon, even that feeling is just appearing. So in the moment, it's just bang, it's doing itself, and everything just appears and appears. And there can seem to be all this process, all these chains of events, I read this, and then I think a thought, and then I say it, and then, I look and I see, so on and so forth. All of this seeming process, this seeming, chains of events. But all of this, if I look very closely, in the instant it is just this flash of presence and qualities, just exactly as it is. And obviously it's very subtle and weird because it's kind of ongoingly a flash of presence and qualities. It's always present and the qualities are always changing, which is really weird because how does that work? What is this change stuff and all that? But of course then you can't answer that question. But you can't answer any question about what this is and how it works, so that's not surprising. So it's spontaneous, it's uncontrollable. You don't know what you're going to be experiencing in the next instant. You can't know. You just can't know. I mean, again, the more vague and general you are, the more I can say, well, let's see, I'm turning my head, which means I'm going to be experiencing that wall. So yeah, that was accurate. That happened. But that's pretty vague. That sentence is actually pretty vague because exactly what colors and shapes I was seeing and exactly when I saw them, I didn't know. I couldn't know. So again, we can summon up accuracy of description the more vague we are, the more general we are. And if you look closely, you'll discover that all human discourse is very vague, very general. Has to be. Because you can't pin down with precision what actual event is. It's instantaneous. There's only this present moment, right? Where's the past? You can't see it, can't find it. I can remember it, but when I remember it, it's a memory happening now, right? Present moment. Where's the future? Well, I can anticipate it, I'm waving my hand, I can anticipate it's here, and then it's going to be here. But it's always exactly where it is now. It's never actually moving The movement is just continual, instantaneous apparition in the moment, right? Completely instantaneous. Okay, how long does the present moment last? Half a second, nanosecond, little while, pretty short, real short. real short. Okay. The present moment has absolutely zero duration. How weird is that?
There's no present moment.
I'm sorry?
There's no present moment because that's a nation and to say the present moment.
Yeah.
There's no present moment.
Right. So there's no present moment, but on the other hand, there's nothing but the present moment, right? Here you are. So how weird is that?
That's the closest approximation language we have to articulating it.
Sure.
But just because you say this means it exists.
Right, exactly. So it's instantaneous.
It's sort of forever.
And it's sort of forever, isn't that weird? Well, the weirdness continues. The closer you look at this, the weirder it gets, and that's kind of the point. The point is, the closer you look at this, the weirder you discover that it is. So it leaves no residue whatsoever. We think of the past as being this big, huge, sloppy trail of everything that's ever happened that goes back to the Big Bang, and there's the wreckage of Napoleonic wars and in World War II and prior political conditions and prior social economics and God knows what. We think of these things as sort of like a wake of wreckage that the present moment leaves. Where is it? There's just this instantaneous flash of present experience, and with effortless, absolute transparency, it's completely and utterly gone. As soon as it appears, it's gone. And even saying that, as soon as it appears, it's gone. It's not like there's any actual finite time where it's here and then it's gone. It's like even in the here-ness, it's gone already. The present is continually gone. There's nothing else but the present, and it's always gone. How weird is that? So it's instantaneous, leaving no residue whatsoever. And check it out for yourself. Just this is not intended to be philosophy. This is an invitation to look freshly at what's actually going on here, your experience. So, notice that appearance in any perspective is entirely unanalyzable, indescribable, unmodelable, not susceptible to accurate or precise description or definition whatsoever. Can't pin down exactly what anything is, exactly how anything is, in any terms whatsoever. And again, the more vague you are, the more general you are, the more you can seem to do this. And of course, all of human analysis is based upon this. I'm wearing a green t-shirt, and this is a white cup with a dark green logo and black printing on it, and this is a white piece of paper with a... Okay, what color is this sheet of paper? Well, every point of it is a slightly different shade luminosity than every other point. And the points aren't discrete. I can't find this point and say what color it is, and in the next instant it's already morphed and mutated as my attention shifts or the light shifts or it moves a little bit. So there's this incredible detail, none of which is pinnable down. You can't say what any of it actually is with precision. But again, you sort of zoom back and you get vague, and it's a white piece of paper. Okay, cool. No problem. Yeah, it's a white piece of paper, all right. But what is it precisely, experientially? All bets are off all of a sudden. It's just an infinite palette of nuance. Okay, notice that every aspect of experience is precisely what it is and the way that it is. Now this is huge. It may seem from all of this narration that this is all kind of vague. It's all kind of blends into a blob or a blur or a sort of a indeterminate nothing. It's not like that, is it? Experience is incredibly, sharply, brilliantly, precisely, exactly the way it is every instant. I mean, your experience is like, bang, all of this infinite detail, infinite qualities are exactly the way they are in the moment. Now, as we've discussed, you can't say what that is. You can't describe it. You can't make a laundry list that includes all of that. But that doesn't mean it isn't that way. It is precise, exactly the way it is. So this is weird. It's precisely the way it is, but you can't say what that is. You can't even find what that is. Precisely what it is, with inconceivable precision and detail, and yet you can't find it, you can't pin it down. Weird. Very weird. But notice that experience is a single fact, and all the infinite apparent aspects of that fact have no independent existence. So, it's all bang. Here's the instant of your experience. Everything, bang, exactly, precisely the way it is. And when you say everything, you just mean your experience. And we're all used to thinking of it in terms of all these parts and pieces. Well, these are people, and I'm sitting in chairs, and we're in a room, and I'm thinking this, and I'm feeling that, and I'm, remembering this, and I'm blah, blah, hearing this. And, we have all of these subcategories of all of this stuff that we think of as more or less independently existing, sort of interacting, in the world and so on. And yet, in actuality, if you look at the experiential field, there's the instantaneous flash of apparition. And that flash, right now, contains all of of it, effortlessly. Anything whatsoever that you could theoretically think about or analyze or whatever, is where are you going to look for that in this flash? Where are you going to look for the analysis of it? Where are you going to think about it? In this flash. So this instantaneous, miraculous presence of your experiential field right now, always right now, is everything. And there's no pieces and parts. Now, I didn't get into that just in detail in this particular paper for no particular reason, but it is infinitely differentiated. And that's another aspect of it that is very weird, it's very strange, the way in which it is infinitely differentiated. Like, just look at your field of vision, say. So here, my field of vision is sort of sitting here floating. Where's it floating? Well, it's here. Okay. What's it on? I don't know, it's just here. It's kind of a let's say vaguely it's a sort of a sideways ovoid with sort of fuzzy edges that sort of grays out towards the edge into indeterminacy. I can't find any edges, right? But anyway, all of these colors and shapes and brightnesses and contrasts and all of this incredible detail and differentiation appearing each moment in the field of vision, right? It's just, so how many colors am I seeing right now? Unanswerable. How many brightnesses am I seeing right now? Unanswerable. How many shapes am I seeing right now? Unanswerable. It's not discrete. It's literally a field of infinite differentiation. If I look at your green jacket, if I'm vague about it, it's a green jacket. It's green, yeah, no argument, it's green. But then, exactly what shade is it? Well, if I look there, I see that shade. And I look next to it, and I see a slightly different shade. And I look in between them, I see a different shade. And I look even closer to where I first looked, I see a different shade. I look back where I first looked, and it's already different. Because experientially, it's not locked in. It's not like in a vice grip of being a certain way. It's however it strikes me, however it seems to appear. So how many places could I look on this green jacket and find a different shade of green? Well, it depends how long I have. I mean, we can sit here for the next, 8 months and find different shades of green on that jacket, in a square inch of that jacket, in a square 16th of an inch in that jacket. No matter, you can zoom in as much as you want, you can zoom out as much as you want, you find infinite differentiation. Not just a lot of differentiation, but literally infinite. You can find as much difference as you care to look for. And yet it's all one thing. I mean, how weird is that? The field of vision is just the field of vision. It's one thing, and yet it's infinitely differentiated within itself. in terms of the experiential characteristics it seems to present as, right? All these colors and shapes and brightnesses, right? And yet it's just this one thing. All of that is this. And it never becomes partialized. It never becomes pieces. It's always one thing. It's always just this right here. It's like a pie. How many pieces can you slice a pie into? Well, as many as you want, right? Depends how sharp your knife is, right? But the pie is just a pie. It's just a pie. It's never going to be any more or less than the pie, no matter how many slices you slice it into, or better yet, think of slicing it into, because all of this analysis is just thought. You can't actually pull colors apart from each other. I can't take your green jacket and hold it outside my field of vision and then have my field of vision and your green jacket over here, right? It's always the field of vision. It never stops being that. So these slices of the pie of this color and that color, this shape and that shape, this color and that color and that color and that color, are not actually separations. They're only hypothetical separations that I make in my mind. I say a this and a that, but that doesn't create an actual this and an actual that are then separable, where I can take the this and put it here and take the that and take it out of my experience and put it somewhere else, right? It's like looking at a piece of paper and I have scissors in my hand. It's like, how many pieces can I slice that paper into? Pick a number, right? How many colors can I see? Well, pick a number, right? But when I start making laundry lists, when I start categorizing how many slices I can slice, how many pieces I can slice the paper into, the paper doesn't actually get cut. And even if I did cut the paper, it would still just be paper here in the field of vision. It would still just be vision. It never actually becomes anything else. The pieces never actually become autonomous, become something else, become separated from their field and put over here. It's always just vision. Whatever happens in vision stays in vision. So, notice that experience is a single fact, and that all the infinite apparent aspects of that fact have no independent existence, or indeed even findability, other than as this fact alone. Right? No matter what you're looking at your field of vision. No matter what you're experiencing, you're looking at your field of experience. It never becomes anything else. It never departs from that. It never gets added to or taken away from. So everything happens within this, whatever it is, of your experience. Space, here's space, right? Time, action, consciousness. Consciousness is a biggie. Hey, we're all spiritual people. Consciousness, right? Okay, here's your consciousness, right? Where? What? Here's your field of experience. Where's your consciousness? These things can seem to have validity if you don't look too closely. You start looking closely, it's like, well, so here's my field of vision. Where's my consciousness relative to the field of vision? Well, I'm conscious of the field of vision, so the consciousness must be, in or touching the field of vision if there were like two things, right? But can you actually find consciousness as separate from anything? Can you find anything as separate from consciousness? What does consciousness even mean? It's an assertion. There's my consciousness and that's how I experience, right? Where? Prove it. Show me. Find it. All there is this presence. We call it experience and we say it, it's being experienced by consciousness. Consciousness is, a byproduct of biochemical activity in my brain. Whatever, right? I mean, we just spin all these stories out. But can you actually find any of this stuff? All you ever find is this. You can't depart from this. You can't shut this off. You can't get beyond this. You can't add to this. You can't take away from this. It's always just this complete field of your experience. Right here, right now, just like always, right? Space, here's space, right? Here's time. Action, here's action. The bottle cap's still sitting there. Let me move it around so we get some action, okay? There's action, right? When you see that action, are you seeing anything other than an experience, you know? And now it's technically not an action, it's just sitting there, although let's say that's an action, right? Whatever. Still just experience, hasn't gotten more or less of anything. Perception, well, here's perception, right? Cause and effect. Cause and effect is, you know, is a biggie, you know, this causes this, that causes that. And when you look for the cause, what are you looking at? Experience. When you look for the effect, what are you looking at? Experience. And does it ever become more or less experience? Does it ever become even different experience? It's still, anything that happens in vision stays in vision, so it never departs from vision. So you have a chains of cause and effect that are showing up in the visual field, you know. It's all just, it's just an argument, it's a spin doctoring of apparent characteristics within the visual field. It never becomes more or less anything. It's vision before it happens, it's vision while it's happening, it's vision after it happens, and it hasn't become anything. It looks different, but it always looks different because it's infinitely differentiated. Aliveness versus inanimation. Okay, I'm alive, this is inanimate. Right? It's like, okay. Both look like vision to me, right? But I can feel my hand, I can't feel, well, I'm feeling it, now I'm not feeling it. It's okay, so what? What does that mean? I don't know. What does it prove? I don't know. All conditions that are held within human consensus reality to constitute the ingredients of our lives. All things, all events, all action, all interaction, all causal chains, all substance. Okay, the world is made of matter, and matter comes from the Big Bang. I don't know, think about that and you'll get dizzy real fast. And so, okay, cool. So here's matter, right? Where do you look for matter? Well, in the experiential field. Okay. So matter turns out to be experience. Well, that's interesting. But there's matter outside of experience, right? Okay, go find it. Go find the matter that's outside of experience. Go find the objective matter. Go find it. So, all conditions that are held within human consensus reality to constitute the ingredients of our lives cannot be found except as absolutely transcendental, i.e. transcending analysis, transcending getting a handle on them, transcending and figuring out what the heck is going on with it, completely and utterly, transcendental implications of this one fact condition. And this fact is, of course, the miraculous presence of your experiential field. Okay, so right, your experiential field is right here, right? How many other experiential fields are there you can find?
Zero. I can't find anything other than what I perceive.
Yeah, interesting, eh? So you're the sole inhabitant of your experiential field. Isn't that interesting? And you can't find anything other than or outside of it. So you're the sole inhabitant of your universe. Isn't that an interesting state of affairs? Kind of a little bit different than consensus reality view. So notice that your being, your consciousness perception, although actual, cannot be isolated or found as partialities within this infinite field of experience. So, you know, you feel your uniqueness, right? Yeah, this is me. Yeah, I'm here. I mean, it's self-evident, you know, it's palpable. I know I am here, right? So there's my being. Yeah, my being is self-evident, you know, this is my perception, this is my consciousness, it's self-evident. But are those notions at all meaningful in any sense whatsoever? Are they partial aspects of this that are findable as partial aspects, as independent conditions or entities, as independent actions, as anything? So this is, okay, here's me. I'm here. I am here. I'm as much here as I have ever been, I know I am. I know I'm alive. I know I'm here. If you'd said I wasn't, I would say, you're a philosopher. But in actual fact, here I am, right? But so here's this phrase. It's a felt, palpable, self-evident fact. I am here. But what does that really mean? Again, it turns out to mean, when I go looking for this I, this self-evident, self-verifying, felt sense of me-ness, where do I look? What do I find? Again, you find your experiential field, your infinite experiential field. This is me. Is there a point where me is more in the experiential field and less in the experiential field? That you can actually find. Is there a part of your experience that's more you and part of your experience that's less you? Check it out. Is there a part of your experience, we talked about this a little earlier, is there a part of your experience where you can find your consciousness? Well, my consciousness is kind of concentrated over here, and it sort of vaguely peters out and gets lesser and lesser, like by an inverse square law, as it goes out into the infinite reaches. Bullshit. You can't. If there is consciousness, this is it, right? If there is you-ness, this is it, and there self-verifyingly is in the palpable, self-verifying sense in which we actually refer to these notions. Yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm conscious. Yeah, I'm perceiving all of these things. But if you go looking for what that actually refers to, again, you don't find anything separate or isolatable or as a subsystem or a sub-aspect or a sub-component or some part of some mechanism that is this. You find this. So this is me. I am the sole inhabitant of my experience. I'm the sole experiencer of my experience. As far as I know, I alone exist, or I'll just say my experiential field alone exists. And if I go trying to find me, I find the experiential field. If I try and find my consciousness, I find the experiential field. If I try and find perception, I find the experiential field. And I can't find anything, any portion of that is more or less, where any of these assertions are more or less the case. It's across the board. And are there even portions? I mean, we talk about, there's the field of vision, and there's the field of sensation, and there's the field of hearing, and there's the field of thought, and there's the, smell, taste, all these, sense fields that we're used to categorizing. Where do you find these things? Well, in experience. So, you find your field of vision. Well, here it is. Okay, no problem. That was an easy one. Find your field of touch. Okay, no problem. It's an easy one. Okay, what's the relationship of your field of sensation to your field of vision? Well, they're kind of, they're not really next to each other. They're not really far apart. They aren't really close to, you try and pin these things down as actual independent entities that have any relationship to each other whatsoever. You don't find anything. These turn out to be, it's a very weird fact. You can effortlessly know vision, and you can effortlessly distinguish vision from sense of touch, right? It's just completely obvious. It's intuitive. I know I'm hearing a lawnmower. I'm not seeing it, and I know I'm seeing you all sitting in these chairs. I'm not hearing it, although unless you're moving and rustling. So I can do that, right? But when I'm doing that, what am I actually doing? How does that happen? What is hearing? What is its relationship to vision? And this is where it gets slippery. This is where, if you look closely, even though it is intuitively obvious that this is the case and that I can engage with these things with very high accuracy, so on and so forth, if I really look closely at what it actually is, what's actually happening, it gets weird. It gets very weird. You can't pin these things down. You can't isolate it. And again and again, this aspect of actuality, of reality, of the experiential field comes up. The word I like to refer to sort of as a bin, to sort of lump all this aspect of it into, is transcendental. Experience is intrinsically transcendental, which means when you try and pin down any aspect of what it is and the way it is, it starts to get weird. And the closer you look, the weirder it gets. And if you are sharp, if you are careful, if you are intelligent, there's no limit to how weird it will be. It's not like you'll look closer and closer and after a while it'll start to make sense. On the contrary, the closer you look, the weirder it gets. And you look closer and it's even weirder still. And you look closer and it's even weirder still. And so this is a condition that, to me, the word transcendental kind of rather nicely implies. And again, of course, you can't say what that actually means, but you can't say what anything actually means, so there's no problem there. So, where are we?
Hesitate for a second while I change.
Okay, I'll go. Where am I? I'm lost. Oh. Technical difficulties.
Okay, we're on.
We're rolling. Okay. So your being, your consciousness, perception, although actual, self-verifyingly actual, cannot be isolated or found as partialities within this infinite field of experience. Since these conditions are as such, your you-ness, your being, your consciousness and all that, they're self-validating actualities. It's palpable that that's kind of, it's a viable way to feel this. Yeah, I'm here, sure, I'm real. Even though they are self-validating actualities, they are this itself. They are nothing other than this. And when you go looking for them, you're looking for these actualities, what you actually find is the actuality, the sole actuality of the experiential field in toto. Of course, this is true with anything you go looking for. Try and pin down exactly what anything and every reality, actuality that you can find, which of course is, you find it experientially, of course, and you will find ultimately nothing other than this transcendental fact of your experiential field. So these conditions are self-validating actualities. They are this itself. And in this obvious perspective will be noticed to permeate the entirety of this actuality. You can't find a place where you stop and otherness begins. You can't find a place where consciousness stops and unconsciousness begins. You can't find, you can't find subsystems that are autonomous, that have an actual barrier where they are that, and then they stop being that at a certain point, and then there's something else. There's just this very strange, infinite continuum where it all melts into, or it turns out to always have been, just this that is here. And yet, even though all normal modes of grasping or analyzing this actuality fail utterly, that is, it cannot be found as being anything in particular in analytical terms, if you're careful, if you look closely. It's actual. Even though this is infinitely weird, even though this is, as I put it, transcendental, even though this is dizzyingly bizarre, it's for real. It's real. It's really here. This is it. It's actual. This is actuality. This is reality. It's meaningful to refer to it as reality because it's real. And of course you can't say exactly what that means. You can't pin it down, but then again you can't pin down what anything means, so no problem there. And yet, palpably, self-evidently, if someone comes up to you and says, "Oh, this isn't real," this isn't really happening. You don't really exist. It's just such utter bullshit. The actuality of this is the sole fact. Again, notwithstanding that you can't land on what that actually refers to. What is actuality? Well, I don't know, but here it is. What is reality? I don't know, but here it is. This is it. This is as real as it gets. This is as actual as it gets, which is pretty damn actual when there's nothing to compare it to. So, even though it cannot be found as being anything in particular in analytical terms, precisely, it is actual. And it is intrinsically a positivity. So you can't find it, you can't analyze it, you can't think about it, you can't model it, So we're talking about all these negative terms. It's like we're sort of erasing it or cancelling it out of existence. But it's not like that. It's a positivity, it's an actuality. It is. It alone is. And the fact that all our accustomed ways of orienting to it tend to really peter out, no pun intended, when you look at it closely, when you start getting precise about it, that's you're not actually diminishing it. You're not actually erasing it. It is a positivity. It is what it is. It actually is what it is, the way that it is, and that is a fact. That is the fact, and that and that's as powerful as it gets. So when I call it a positivity, I'm not meaning like good as opposed to bad or something like that. I mean it is not a negation. It is not an eliminating. It, on the contrary, it is doing and putting everything. All reality is real because it is real. All reality is actual because it is actual. It is right here, right now, always, for real. And of course, this is palpable. It's intuitively obvious, even though you get dizzy when you're trying to say what that actually refers to or means. So it's intrinsically a positivity. It's not made up of negating anything, but is on the contrary the positivity of which any and everything whatsoever actually consists. So there's only one thing here, and anything that seems to be here only seems to be here because this is here. This one thing, this one fact, this one condition that is as it is, with incredible precision, with incredible specificity. And the fact that, this is the positivity of which any and everything whatsoever actually consists. And this being so, that is the case, intrinsically negates and disproves all the things and conditions that seem to populate experience. It leaves only itself. So if you look closely at the comprehensiveness of this fact, the fact of this presence, the fact of the presence of the experiential field, and that it alone constitutes all the myriad of stuff that people are used to concerning themselves with and getting all worked up about and talking about and thinking about and owning and fighting over and all the other stuff, right? All of that is just this. Obviously, palpably, self-verifyingly. There's no doubt about it. It's not an argument or an assertion or a philosophical position or a hypothesis. It's just plain out and out, balls to the wall fact. It just, look for yourself and see. So this being so intrinsically negates and disproves in themselves the things and conditions that seem to populate experience, leaving only itself. This actuality can be meaningfully referred to as present. It's present, right? It's here. It's present in the time sense, and it's present in the present sense. It is present. It is here. It is in your face, so to speak. Your face is in your face. So it can meaningfully be referred to as present, since it self-verifyingly is, even though what and how that is the case is intrinsically inscrutable, and as radiant, in that it spontaneously presents as infinitely differentiated, infinite fields of experiential characteristics. So this is present, this alone is here, and yet, my God, look at these colors, look at these sensations, look at these thoughts, look at these feelings, this inconceivable myriad richness of all of these qualities. all of this detail, all of these amazing, amazing flavors that this is. And yet all of these flavors and all this detail are just this. How does that work? It's infinitely differentiated within itself, and yet it never departs from itself. It's infinitely differentiated within itself, but it's always just itself. Your field of vision is always infinitely differentiated in the moment, and it's infinitely differentiated from the next moment. Exactly what you see in the moment you will never see again, you've never seen before. And now it's already completely different, you're seeing something completely different that you've never seen before and never will see again, and so on. That's always the case. So it's infinitely differentiated, spatially, temporally, and along every analytical axis you want to throw at it whatsoever. And yet, it's always just this. It never becomes anything else. It never departs from itself. It never moves away from, or becomes more than, or adds to itself, even though it's infinitely differentiated. And then, so that's this field of vision. Then there's a differentiation of the different sense fields, differentiation of fields of thought fields. I mean, how many fields of thought are there? How many fields of emotion are there? How many fields of subtle mental qualities are there? How many fields of, psychic vibes are there, I mean, trying to quantify that stuff is an absurdity. It's just like, whoa! I mean, you can just trip forever. You can just go out into experiential subtlety, and you'll never repeat yourself. You'll just be moving on forever into infinite whatever, right? And yet, you won't ever go anywhere. It'll always just be this, right here. It's always exactly what it is. It's never become anything else. It never was anything else. It never will be anything else. It's just this. It's just you. It's just reality. It's just consciousness. It's just the universe. It's just your experiential field. It's just, we have all these words we throw at it, and we like to pretend that means something because they have some ability to be differentiated. But since they all refer to the same thing, how different can they really be? So I refer to this quality as radiant, in the sense that God is just flashing forth with all these just infinite characteristics, infinite apparent differentiation. Just wow, colors and sounds and lights and textures and thoughts and flavors and vibes, and never repeating, always spontaneous, always unique, never having happened before. And yet all of this radiance, all of these radiant experiential characteristics never depart from the presence, never depart from this actuality, just this here, like always, what it is, your being, your experiential field. So, this actuality can be meaningfully referred to as present, since it self-verifyingly is, even though what and how that is the case is intrinsically inscrutable, and as radiant, in that it spontaneously presents as infinitely differentiated, infinite fields of experiential characteristics, even though these characteristics cannot be found, isolated, or analyzed, can't be pinned down. You can't actually find what anything is. You can't actually say what any color exactly is. Again, the more vague you are, the more general you are, you can talk all day, and we're all very familiar with this. This is what we humans do, right? You go hang out in Starbucks and listen to all the chatter. Every word that everyone is saying is referring to nothing other than their experiential field. And yet they think that it's old with them. I was talking about what she did yesterday, and I was talking about, did you hear what was in the news? And I was all these apparent differentiations that are so different from each other. And yet, because it's vague, it's general. It's like, okay, what exactly, when you say what she did yesterday, what exactly is yesterday? What exactly is she? What exactly is did? And when you start getting precise, you come back to presence. You come back to the presence of the experiential field. You come back to radiant presence. This, that is here. So the single actuality of radiant presence, which inherently includes all of reality, by its nature engages with itself to produce the phenomena of your life. Okay, so all of this, here's your life, right? It's ongoing. I mean, you're at this stupid retreat now, but all the stuff that's been happening, it's going to continue to happen, and so on and so forth. And yet it's all just the internal process, so to speak, whatever that is, the internal mechanism, so to speak, whatever that is, of this radiant presence. It's doing itself, it's being itself, with itself, and hence all of this. So, by its nature, it engages with itself to produce the phenomena of your life. This self-engagement that your experience consists of can be called a yoga. Now, yoga is a word that comes from Sanskrit. It basically refers to engagement. It refers to engagement's a good way to put it. The etymologically, the root means joining. Yoga, our word yoke, as in yoke oxen to a cart, which is a little archaic, but we don't really use yoke except with eggs much these days. But our word yoke etymologically comes from the same root as the word yoga in Sanskrit. So yoga means a joining, means a hooking up, means an engagement. And this is, we can think of this as essentially being engaged with itself to do all this stuff. And how about all you're doing? I mean, you're doing stuff, right? You're engaged with your life. You're participating, right? You're here, you're doing things, you're here because you want to be, and then you're going to go somewhere else and you'll be there because you want to be, and you'll be doing this and engaged with that and learning this and creating that, and right? So you're engaged with all this, and yet your engagement with the details of your life, when you look really, really closely, turns out to be nothing other than this is engagement with itself. So the radiant presence, being engaged with itself, is doing all this. It's doing all your engagement. And noticing this fact, so calling it a yoga technically, you can do that. It's a word. So ceasing to hold your experience as anything other than this transcendental engagement of radiant presence with itself reveals your experience as this, the eternal ongoing yoga of radiant presence and nothing else. I'm going to read that again because it's a kicker. It's my closer. It's a money shot. So ceasing to hold your experience as anything other than this transcendental engagement of radiant presence with itself reveals your experience as this. Your life is this. Your entire history is this. Your process is this. Your goals is this. What you're striving for, your nature, your entire unfoldment is this. This is the self-engagement of the radiant presence with itself. So this is the eternally ongoing yoga of radiant presence. So it's not something you're doing. It's not something you cannot do. It's just what's happening. And it's happening spontaneously essentially through what we can think of as self-engagement, although obviously that's too much analysis because when you look at what it is itself, it's just too weird. You can't even pin that down, but it's kind of a nice sort of a cozy metaphor, so we can rest there. The eternally ongoing yoga of radiant presence and nothing else. That's what this is. And the yoga of radiant presence, as a yoga that you can learn and do, consists of nothing other than noticing this fact. Well, here is this. I'm used to calling it my life. In this case, I could describe it as, well, I'm here, I'm giving a talk, to these people, and I'm on the East Coast, and blah, 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 narrative. How did that happen? How did that come about? What's actually going on here? Well, I don't know. It's just my process, A bunch of weird shit happens, and I find myself here doing this talk. How did that happen? What was it? Well, I don't know. It's just the ongoing flow of time, the ongoing flow of events, the continual dynamism of my experiential field. Well, how does that happen? Well, I don't know. It's doing itself. It itself is doing this internal process with itself, if it is a process. But it can't be anything other than with itself because there's nothing but it. So it's self-engaged doing all this. So this is the yoga of radiant presence. Me sitting here giving a talk is just a very convoluted way of saying radiant presence, doing radiant presence. You guys here listening to this talk is a very complicated way of saying radiant presence, doing radiant presence. Anything whatsoever you could say, described as happening or as being anything, is nothing other than radiant presence, doing radiant presence. And seeing that fact is very powerful, because when you discover the nonlinearity, the intrinsic weirdness, the intrinsic infinite nature of what this is and how it is what it is, then you are free to participate with all this event on that level. And you're essentially free of the ball and chain of sloppy, heavy-handed human conceptualization, which is entirely inaccurate. It's completely wrong. Everything anyone has ever thought or said is wrong, is not true, is inaccurate, is imprecise. Whereas there is precision. This is precisely the way it is, and that way cannot be said, has never been said, never will be said. What this is has never been seen by any eye. Eyes don't see anything. How is this seen? I don't know. Radiant presence, it sees itself. No ear has heard. Ears aren't hearing anything. How does hearing happen? Can't answer that question. No hand has touched it. Hands don't touch. How does touch happen? It's a miraculous presence of transcendental characteristics of radiance that are present. And it's unthinkable. It cannot be thought. And, this is in keeping with the quote from Jesus from Gospel of Thomas. I will show you what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no hand has touched, and what has never occurred to the human mind, which is nothing other than this. This isn't here because it's being felt by hands or seen by eyes or thought by minds. This is here miraculously. But it's not miraculously in a vague metaphorical sense. It's fucking literally miraculous. This is a miracle. And if it's not a miracle, then you've got really high standards of what you mean by the word miracle. Because to my observation, I look at the way this is and I just go, wow. I mean, just plain wow. Reality exists. Now, this may seem very obvious and even trite. If you said reality exists to anyone, they'll go, and if you said reality doesn't exist, they might look at you funny, right? But that reality exists is actually a big deal. And we are very talented, as beings, humans are very talented at thinking about reality. And unfortunately, we're also very susceptible to getting confused between our thoughts about reality and reality itself. Let's take some examples. Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, materialist science, capitalist greed. All of these are maps of exactly the same reality. If you take capitalist greed, and let's also say socialist idealism, just to toss that in the mix, just to get a little more contrast. All of these are maps of exactly the same reality. Okay? What each one of those is about is exactly the same thing. It's like if you have if you're in London and you have one brand of map to London and you have a different brand of map to London, it's the same London that's being mapped. So if your maps disagree, it has absolutely nothing to do with there being two Londons that are at odds with each other. Now, people can not notice this fact. People can very easily, the human consciousness apparently, can very easily confuse the map, the mentally held overlay of an interpretive, let's call it an interpretive framework of what things are, what anything is, what one is, what the world is, what anything whatsoever is, and how it is, with the condition itself. Witness all of these, wars about religious wars, ideological wars, all of these things are fighting over maps. You know, my map's different than yours. Your map is wrong. I'm going to kill you. Why not look at what the map is of and give it a little more attention? You know, instead of Buddhists and Christians disagreeing with each other and saying, gosh, these Christians, you know, I mean, of course the Buddhists would never actually criticize them because they're busy being all compassionate. but they will, you know, say, gosh, these poor, you know, I feel sorry for these poor misguided sentient beings because, you know, they're on an erroneous path of delusion. Whereas the Christians are just like, you guys are all going to hell because you haven't accepted the Lord Jesus Christ as your Savior in your heart, or whatever, right? They're not fighting about the actual condition. They're not even looking at the actual condition, even though that's all that they're actually looking at and all that they're actually seeing. It's a very strange, paradoxical situation. Look at it, it's weird, you know. And the whole issue, the whole spiritual problem, and, no surprise, spiritual solution, consists of this very one issue, of the potential confusion between the interpretive framework of what reality is and reality itself, and not noticing the difference. It's not that there's an interpretive framework that's a problem, and it's not that the interpretive framework is different from someone else's interpretive framework, or that it is inaccurate with regard to reality. All interpretive frameworks are inherently inaccurate. It is impossible to have an accurate interpretive framework, because what reality, this that is actually here is inherently uninterpretable, conceptually, ideationally, by modeling. It can't be done. It's too weird, it's too slippery, it's too paradoxical, it's too multidimensional. It just cannot be done. There's nothing wrong with interpretive frameworks. They're fine, you know. We all use them all the time. So the problem isn't the interpretive frameworks, and the problem isn't even the inaccuracy of the interpretive frameworks. The problem is getting confused between an interpretive framework and the actuality. And the solution is to notice the difference between an interpretive framework and reality itself. Now, yesterday we spent all day talking mostly about the nature of reality, and not too much about this issue of interpretive frameworks per se. So the hallmark of an interpretive framework is anything that seems to be a certain way to any extent. That's an interpretation, i.e. it's partial, it's inaccurate, it does not accurately capture reality. Because reality is every way at once. Reality is intrinsically weird, it's intrinsically paradoxical, it's intrinsically non-linear, so you can't say what it is. You know, reality, as soon as you can say it is like this, or it is this, or it is in this way, you're oversimplifying. Because the way it actually is cannot be said, it cannot be thought, it cannot be put into symbols. I mean, you can be the most advanced physicist that ever lived and master and invent whole new branches of mathematical language in order to describe this, and you're still going to fail utterly. Because what this is undescribable. No matter how much genius you have to throw at it, you're going to miss the mark. Because it's intrinsically not describable. It's intrinsically transcendental. When I say transcendental, I mean it transcends being any particular way. I mean, how do you describe something that transcends being any particular way? It even transcends not being any particular way. It shows up as all kinds of particular ways. It's weirder than that. It's weirder than weird. It's so weird it can seem normal. I mean, how weird is that? But all that's irrelevant. So the point isn't how weird reality is. The point is that we can hold it as being various ways and not notice that reality itself transcends what we're holding it to be. And this is the entire spiritual problem. You may recall in the beginning of that sheet we talked about yesterday, the first paragraph said something along those lines. You know, the entire spiritual problem is about holding an inaccurate interpretation of what reality is. And the solution is to see that this is so. The solution is not to get an accurate interpretation, because that can't be done. And the mind is endlessly going to spit out interpretations, because that's what the mind does. The mind thinks, the mind models, the mind, sits there and talks to itself and says, gosh, this is kind of like this, and this is kind of like that, and I really like this, and this is better than that, and it's going to continue to do that. That's what the mind does. And it's not a problem that it does that. But the mind cannot capture reality, and it doesn't necessarily know that it can't capture reality. It's like the mind is like a team of idiot savants who are sitting there busy trying to figure out everything, and they're too idiotic to know that they can't figure out anything, but they're savants, so they're busy churning out these ingenious explanations of everything. And the problem is that there's no oversight. If there's no higher up looking at these guys and saying, well, gee, these are great explanations, but put them over there in the filing cabinet. So anything that seems to be, for sure, a certain way, it seems to be that you can pin it down to any extent, or know what it is to any extent, or know how it is, know the way in which it is to any extent. This is a sign of an interpretive framework. And this is a sign of inaccuracy. It's inherent inaccuracy. It's not completely inaccurate, but it's an approximation. And approximations are fine. What's the saying? There's a couple of good sayings about that. Anyway. Well, the one that comes to mind is good enough for rock and roll, but I'm a musician, so. That's what you say when someone's trying to tune their instrument. You say, well, it's good enough for rock and roll. Not in tune, but it's just rock and roll, so who cares? And basically, this is the situation with all of these interpretive frameworks. They are not accurate. They're fine. It's not a problem. You can use approximations, and we do it all the time. We're sitting in this room. We're having a conversation. We're sitting on metal chairs. Some of you have cushions. Some of you have drinks. Everything I just said is not exactly true. Every single thing I just said is not exactly true. It's true enough. It's pretty true. It's not wrong, but it's not the truth. It is the actuality that is here. It completely and utterly transcends that description. And I could have been much more articulate and gone into a dissertation about the details of what's here and the quantum phenomena that are interacting and blah, 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 blah. And it would still be completely inaccurate. Not wrong. It's fine as far as it goes. It's an approximation. But approximations are not the thing approximated. The map is not the terrain. And that's the whole issue, is just getting that fact, seeing that fact firsthand for yourself. The map is not the terrain. And then you won't confuse the two. And it's the confusion between the map and the terrain that causes all the problems, that causes all spiritual dilemmas, in spirituality there's all kinds of discussion of delusion and confusion and being lost in samsara and being, suffering and, a separate individual. All these different philosophies model this in different ways. And then there's the great realization and liberation and enlightenment and freedom and, union with God and, all of which, again, are descriptions of the discovery of the actual condition, which is actually approximately like all these approximations. Of course, it's not exactly like it, because they're just approximations. No approximation is accurate. No approximation is true. We played yesterday with a lot of different ways of flirting with this phenomena, with, sort of feeling this phenomena or exploring different experiments to run. And one of the biggies is that whatever is present, there's more present than whatever is present, and that more will be different than whatever is present. So your personality is present, fine. There's also more than your personality present, and it's also other than your personality. Your thoughts are present, fine. There's also more than your thoughts, and this will be other than thoughts. Your field of vision is present, fine. There will also be more than your field of vision. There will also be other than your field of vision. This is universally true. You can dolly back and go to the entire bubble of your experience and wow, I've got it all, thought and mentality and transcendental thought and vibes and all the sense fields and all the subtle bodies and all these energetic phenomena. No, there's more, and it will be other than that. This is universally true. It's in the nature of what this is. It transcends itself. It has no limit. You go to the boundaries, and that's just an arbitrary circle you're drawing, and it's got an outside. And that's there too. And so you can go draw bigger boundaries. and that's going to be just an arbitrary circle you're drawing, and you can go outside. This is the fact. But this is a useful fact. This is very useful in terms of this kind of experimentation, in terms of discovering this or exploring this for yourself. So anything that the attention is drawn to, anything whatsoever, doesn't matter, whatever you're drawn to, your personality, or you're sucked up in something, you're listening to an amazing sound, or you're grooving on amazing sunlight, shimmering off dewdrops, anything, doesn't matter. It's okay, that's great, that's there, what else is there? That's completely and utterly beyond that. And it's not a matter of answering that question or pinning it down. It's a matter of just noticing this moreness. Noticing the moreness. And the actuality of this moreness. This is not an abstraction. It's not the idea that there's more there. There is experientially more there. Experience is bigger than any phenomena that appears in it, no matter how vast that phenomena is. It's infinite, it's limitless, it's endless, literally. And of course, that's a lot of gibberish because it's just a lot of words and yeah, right, what do you do with that? But it happens to be the case, and it's palpable that it's the case. It's knowable that it's the case. You can feel the way in which that's the case because it's evidenced in every experience. It's easy to think of infinity as being big, large, more, but it's little things are like that too. You can look at little tiny experiences, and they have a moreness to them. That is the exact same moreness that you find anywhere, and it has a texture, it has a quality, it has a flavor, a sort of a scent that is revealing. It's profoundly revealing of the strangeness of reality. And once you get a taste of this strangeness, a more immediate, let's call it concrete, sense of this phenomena, of this aspect, it's intrinsically liberating in the sense that it's intrinsically undermines our habit of orienting heavy-handedly to these interpretive frameworks. And this aspect, it's felt. Reality is felt. And this is something you can explore too. It's really a good thing to explore. You say, I'm seeing light. Seeing is a euphemism for feeling, experientially feeling. I'm hearing sound. Hearing is a euphemism for feeling, experientially feeling the presence of sound. I'm thinking. Thinking is a euphemism for feeling thought. Experiencing is always felt, and this feeling is absolutely direct. It's not like there's an experience over there and a you over here that somehow comes together. It's intimate. It's more intimate than intimacy, and it already is that way. It's not like it needs to be found or created or engineered or you have to sort of push them together. It's not like that. It already is completely integral, without collapsing into simplicity. It's infinite complexity, but it's completely integrated. And this is palpable. Feel. Let's do some experiments, shall we? That'd be fun. Just feel the presence of presence, right? So here, experience is present, right? And feel the intimacy of this presence. It's actual. Feel the actuality of this presence. It's really present, right? You can't say what it is, right? You can't get a handle on it, but it's right here. It's totally obvious. And how are you feeling that presence? How is that presence obvious? Why is it obvious? How are you perceiving it? How is it being felt? Where does that happen? There's no mechanism, right? It just is. And that isness is the feeling of its presence, right? Just feel that. Feel the presence of presence. Feel the presence of vision. There's no gap. It's not like vision is over there and you're over here somewhere, is it? Just vision is. And that isness is a felt isness. Experienced. Vision is experienced, and experienced means felt. Just feel it. Feel the presence of sound. The birds singing, people talking in the distance, me droning on, creaking of chairs, just all this little subtle sound. We have names for a lot of these sounds that we suppose they're just causing them, but actually it's just pure sound present. It's like a sea of sound that is just continually present. I would say you're swimming in it, but there's no separate you that's swimming in it. It's just sound, sea of sound present. Just feel that. Feel the sea-ness of it. Feel the texture of it. Feel the intimacy of an absolute intimate engagement with sound. Feel how you can't say what it is. It's completely obvious. It's nakedly transparent. The sound. It's so clearly sound. But you can't say what it is. How could that happen? How could it be experienced? How could it be known? But feel the richness of that texture. Even though you can't say what that richness is, it's palpable, it's juicy, it's yummy. I mean, you can just settle back in it, and it's like settling back into the most luscious hot tub or something, right? The sensation, the sense of touch, just feel the entire field of touch, the presence of what we think of as the presence of our body and all these tinglings and, temperature and all these various ways we classify this. You just feel that cloud of sensation, that whole bandwidth of touch, how it's like a sort of a tingling or a buzzing or something. Can't say what it is, but it's alive. It's it breathes, it moves, it dances, but it has a texture. Feel that richness. It's bottomless richness. There's no limit to how far you can go into that. Just into the subtlety of it, and deeper and deeper and deeper. And when the bubble of the sense of touch is present, sound just isn't going anywhere. It's in its own bandwidth. It's floating around there. So where is sound relative to the bubble of touch, the cloud of touch? Where is touch relative to the cloud of sound? They don't get in each other's way, do they? But you can't find the geometry either, can you? We can see. Feel how rich that is, and how there's no way you could possibly describe it. I mean, you could start throwing poetry at it, but that wouldn't pin it down. Feel the presence of thought. It's always thought present. Even if you're not thinking heavy-handedly, there's a sort of a little gentle lights like the aurora. I don't know what it is. You can't say what it is, but there's always something going on in the dimension of thought, in the bandwidth of thought. And it's subtle, it's delicate, it's luminous, but it has a texture, it has a richness. You can feel it. It's easy to feel. That's how you know you're experiencing it, because you feel it. When you're thinking, you're feeling thought, and there's always thought present. There's always activity in the thought dimension. And you can sort of zoom into it and feel it, and sort of turn up the magnification and sort of feel that whole bandwidth in that. It's very delicate. It's very subtle, right? But then, even when you're looking at that subtlety, look at how there's even that subtlety has even subtler harmonics on it that make the subtlety of thought seem gross and heavy-handed, and those harmonics have even more subtle harmonics on them, and you can just there's always whatever you're looking at, there's always more, and that moreness moves into otherness, and so thought itself moves into subtler and subtler dimensions of sort of para-thought that it completely ultimately transcends being thought and just goes into weirdness. Right? And this is what you're always experiencing. This is just experience, When we're just hanging out and bullshitting with our friends, or relaxing, having a glass of wine, or watching a movie, getting all excited, or telling jokes, it's the same thing. It's just different flavors of this same bandwidth, and all this bandwidth is always full. Thought is always full. The dimension of sound is always full. You may not be paying attention to it consciously, or you may not be, giving it, focusing on it, but it's always full. The field of vision is always full. You go to sleep at night, and basically, it seems like your vision's shutting down, and your hearing's shutting down. They never shut down. They're always full. It just loses definition, or gains a whole different sort of range of definition that, relative to waking state definition, seems like no definition, maybe, or whatever, right? You can't say what it is. But you can't say what the waking is either, if you look closely. And when you do these kinds of experiments, let yourself notice the indescribability of what it really is. Because this is what separates the interpretive framework from reality. Reality is always exactly the way it is. It's precisely the way it is. But what that precise way is cannot be said, cannot be defined, cannot be pinned down. And notice this gets quite obvious, and it is kind of a learning curve. If you do these kinds of explorations and just play with this, you'll get better at it. Zoom into hearing and listen to it. You'll become an expert at the texture of what sound really is, and it's going to blow your mind, because sound is nothing that you're used to thinking of it as being. It's this amazing, hyperspatial, transcendental energy phenomena, palpably. It's just sound. It's just birds singing in the tree. But this becomes really immediately apparent very easily. I mean, that's early on in these kinds of explorations, you begin to notice, wow, the energy that shows up as experiential phenomena is really weird stuff. Light is like that. I mean, we typically go right to the content of light. Oh, I'm looking at you, I'm looking at the room, I'm looking at the trees, I'm looking at this and that. But just light itself, all I'm actually looking at is light. Light is a delightful, exquisite energy, and it has a texture. It's alive. It's a very high frequency kind of a thing. I mean, I don't know what you can't say what it is, of course, because it's real, but it's palpable that it is what it is, and it's palpable the way it is what it is, even though it is beyond conceiving of, beyond describing, and. It's like a training. It's like a learning curve. You very quickly, when you begin to look at these things as direct energy presences, let's call it, the energy of light immediately present. What is this energy? Well, bang, right away you're off and running, and there's no limit to how subtly you can go into that. There's no limit. It's not like, okay, I get it, now I know what light is, check that off the list, and move on to the next thing. It's like, light is just like the tip of an iceberg that just goes on forever. Light is like the surface of a bottomless ocean. And as soon as you start looking at that ocean, you begin to penetrate and moving into the depths, and there's no limit to the depths. And this is true for all, call it experiential energy, what I call the radiance. It's all of this, dynamic, apparitional energy. I mean, this is all very vague, of course. It's all just basically poetry. is right here. Okay, that's the retreat. Thanks for coming.
Hang on the line.
Any questions, thoughts, observations? Yeah.
Well, talking about how I don't know if these things are always there. I remember one time in particular, although it's happened several times more vaguely, where I am sort of waking up. I'm in that alpha state,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, sound comes in.
Right.
I hear the birds and stuff. A moment before, I'm just hanging out.
Right.
So it seems like my brain for sound, when I'm somnambulant or whatever the word,
Right.
is it switches that on, and I can actually be semi-conscious, whatever that is, without sound, and then bang, it'll come in. Can you speak to that?
Is it happen that there's no sound and then there's sound?
Yeah,
Or
it's
is
almost bang.
You can explore if maybe it's a non-sound fullness that then sort of morphs and turns into a sound fullness.
Well, maybe it's a particular thing, not that much more above the norm as far as sound goes, jars me or something like that.
Sure.
Or my consciousness just gets up to a point. But all of a sudden, I'm not experiencing sound, and then I'm experiencing
Right.
sound.
But what I'm suggesting, what I'm inviting you to explore, is let's just call it the possibility that experience is always full. Nothing is ever missing. So when something seems to show up that wasn't there, it's not like something has been added.
Yeah.
It's more that something that was in a more sort of a less explicit state of fullness,
Yeah.
like assumes a sharper form. It gets edges all of a sudden, or gets definition to the point where it crosses a threshold into noticeability. And this is kind of an important point because, this gets into the difference of different states, and ultimately it gets into death and after death. We're used to thinking of these different states as being different from each other, but in actuality they are instances or let's say modes of the same thing. So experience in the waking state is exactly as rich as experience in deep sleep, which is exactly as rich as experience in the dream state. But what it seems to be, the way it presents itself, its interface, so to speak, in terms of the forms that it seems to show up as, can obviously and do very heavy-handedly morph into these other modes of presentation. But there's nothing lost in that, or gained for that matter. In the waking condition, we typically experience a lot of what might seem to be very high definition, sort of precise delineation of this versus that in terms of qualities that are explicitly present. And in the deep sleep state, perhaps less so, at least from the waking perspective. Of course, you'd need to ask your sleeping self what it looks like to it. but from the waking state, we can't remember that as anything perhaps other than whatever, but generally a little more vague, if not a lot more vague, right? But when you go to sleep at night, there's not a sense of loss. I mean, the whole waking experience basically disappears, but it doesn't feel like a loss, does it? I mean, there's still a fullness, there's still a
Unless you're
completeness.
compulsively thinking about something that you want to do, and then it's like,
yeah, sure.
But other than that,
But
it's a relief usually.
Yeah, and that relief reveals that it is not a sense of. It's not like, oh no, I'm losing the waking life. I'm going to be less than I am. It's not a sense of lessness. If anything, it's a sense of greater fullness or something. It's like all the boundaries and the edges and the lines are kind of blurred and erased, and all of a sudden, so it all sort of slurs together. But it's not like it shrinks or gets smaller Oh no, there goes the waking state. Now there's nothing. It's a fullness, and so this is. It's very interesting that all experiential conditions appear in a fullness and don't add to that fullness. And when they disappear back into that fullness. And when they're disappearing, it's not a loss. It's just the fullness is no longer showing up as an explicit readout, you might say. It just sort of fades into the background. Like you might think of it as like a wave in the sea. Here comes a big wave, and then the waves are gone, and it's just the sea's just calm. It's not like anything's been lost. It's all just water. When a wave comes, there's not more water, and when the wave's not there, it's not less water. But the wave gives it a kind of a presentation, a shape, a delineation. And when it sinks back into water, it's that looking at it in those terms, it's like, well, what, it's like it seems like, well, something's gone, but there isn't any actual loss. It's the same thing showing up with a different kind of a presentation. And this is a very important point, because what this is, being itself, or presence, well, let me go to my own terminology. I invented it. I should use it, right? Go to my own bullshit. So, radiant presence is, in my mind, is a technical term for what is actually here. It's a technical term for the ocean, in terms of the ocean wave analogy. So the ocean is radiant presence. It is present. It is beingness. It is actual. And it has the potential to show up in various different ways, and that's the radiance part of it. So in the waking state, it shows up as all this readout. It shows up as sound, sound and lights, and behavior and interaction, and all, and thought and personality and emotion, and all this, all the content we're so used to. You go to sleep, it's not like there's less radiance. It's not like there's less presence. But the radiance goes into other modes. It goes into modes that are less sharply delineated, modes that are maybe more non-linear, modes that are less apparently coherent, and so on. Then a dream may come up, and a dream is like all of a sudden waves coming up in the sea. It's not like all of a sudden something's there that wasn't there. It's just that what is there all of a sudden assumes a different mode of presentation, analogous to maybe waves coming up in the water or something like this. So, but it's not like there's more radiance when you're dreaming out of a deep sleep. It's just that the radiance can present in different ways. It can present in infinite ways. It can present as anything. Now the really interesting thing, which you will each discover, is when you die, radiant presence doesn't go anywhere. It stops looking like you. It stops looking like your life. But in actuality, it doesn't. There's no diminishment, and there's no gain when you're born. It's just a different change of presentation. Now, this is just my assertion. It's my experience, but it's also my assertion. But on the other hand, each one of you is going to find out. So check it out.
But the content, of course, seems to widely vary.
Yes,
so
yes. The content is always, but this is the interesting thing. We fixate. Our whole challenge spiritually, in terms of these interpretive frameworks, is fixating on content as being relevant.
Yeah.
And the learning of this yoga is content doesn't matter. Content is like waves. They're always waves, and they're coming and going, and sometimes they're big and sometimes they're little. They never stop. They never assume any stability. And experience is like that. It comes, it goes. It looks like things, it looks like people, it looks like actions, it looks like going to sleep, it looks like being sick, it looks like, getting drunk, it looks like, whatever. It looks like dreams, and then one day it looks like dying. And then what does it look like? Well, you can't say, because we don't have the after-death language to begin to talk about it with. But what it looks like is not what it is. It is that which can look like anything. What does a dream look like? Well, it looks different every instant, right? And it never repeats itself, so you can't say what dreams look like. But they do look like dreaming. Dreams always look like dreaming. And what's the waking state look like? Well, What you're experiencing now, it's never looked like this before, and it's never going to look like this again. Even now, it doesn't look exactly the same way as it did when I started saying the sentence, right? It's just continually, it's just as elusive and just as continually disappearing forever as a dream, although we don't notice it, because there seems to be more apparent relative stability and a more apparent relative continuity. You know, I can look at you and you're kind of sitting there, and you kind of seem to have been sitting there for a while, and you kind of seem to be still sitting there. But all of that is, again, an inaccurate averaging of the fact that experientially, every instant that I experience you is absolutely unique and gone forever. In the moment it appears, it's gone forever. Just as much as if you were, you know, flashing around and turning into birds and turning into stars and turning into nothing and disappearing and appearing. That's not more dynamic than you are apparitionally. It's just more obviously dynamic. So the waking state is absolutely unstable, absolutely chaotic, absolutely incoherent. But it's easy to not notice that fact because there's a kind of a relative apparent coherence that the interpretive framework seizes upon to say, oh, you know, you're a woman sitting in a chair and we're having a conversation in this room, right? Which is an interpretive framework that can be said to hold from the time this thing started until lunchtime, right? And even though every instant of the actuality transcends that utterly, and is not unlike any other instant of that actuality. So there's actually no coherence and no stability whatsoever, even though the interpretive framework can make it seem as if there is. By averaging. Yeah, you're pretty much there. We're pretty much having a conversation, you know, or more of a diatribe. My apologies. So, but this is noticeable. You can begin to notice this ever-present fullness of experience that shows up sort of with explicit sharp edges, and then, you know, maybe relatively recedes into amorphousness. But there's no gain or loss when it does this. It's just a different mode of seeming, a different mode of sort of its interface.
You're trying to explore karma a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And also, if the radiance can show up as anything,
Yes.
can we see anything at all about why it shows up the way it does?
Yes, it's its nature to. And that's most you can say. It's inherent. I mean, you can model that all sorts of ways. You can generate all sorts of mythology about it. You know, it has some grand purpose, and it has some process that is being affected by all of this stuff we call experience. You know, the experience is experience because it's, you know, it's doing something in its frame of reference, which God knows what that would be. You know, the great purpose of God. You know, all these kinds of things. And we can say that, but since again that's more interpretive framework, it's pointless because it doesn't cover the real thing. What we can say is it's in the nature of radiance to show up with infinite degrees of apparent detail and apparent virtual coherence, even though there's absolute complete incoherence at all times.
I just got a question. What did you mean by karma and radiance? I didn't understand the question.
Probably didn't explain it very well.
Why don't you say what do you mean by karma? When you ask for karma, what specifically are you referring to?
So what I have in my mind is, if, like the ocean, you know, if the radiance is like pure radiance, but it shows up. I mean, this is the presentation.
Right,
of
waves
of its
appear.
actuality.
Right, and the wave
So
is
it's like
the wave is this particular wave, which at this moment is that particular wave, unlike the other waves that it could be but isn't.
So I'm trying to get, is the wave the karma? You know,
Karma is a word for the apparent forms that ultimately the coherence of apparent forms that seem to appear.
Okay,
You could say the patterning.
That's what I was
Yeah.
just trying to see if there's a connection
yeah,
there.
Yes, and radiance by its very nature always appears with infinite degrees of patterning, and this is what karma is, and karma can seem to be karma in more formal terms, when these patterns seem to have sufficient coherence to be definable or pseudo-definable, let's say, and so on and so forth. And, in terms of why is it like that, all you can say is it's the nature of the radiance to do so.
Because I don't feel my karma, but also sometimes I think, well, maybe I do feel my karma because this is my karma. This is everything.
Yeah, you feel nothing but your karma. But the important point, and since you have a background in Buddhism, you understand this, or you certainly should understand it. The important point is the point of the Heart Sutra, which is that karma is actually the void. Karma is actually patternlessness. The patterns are actually patternless, and yet patternlessness is pattern, virtually pattern. Form is the void, and the void is the form. The form is not other than the void, and the void is not other than the form. It's one and the same. And this is where you find liberation. But without erasing karma, it's the discovery that karma isn't really karma. And to put it in less Buddhistic technical terms and in more general language, it means to discover that the conditions that you are used to defining as occurring in your experience, that you are you have your personality, you have your body, you have your history, this person, and you're interacting with them, and all basically anything that's describable, which can be said to be karma, which is bootstrapped on the apparent patterning of raw experience, which seems to be patterned sufficiently that it is describable in these terms. There seems to be. Right? We are sitting here, we are having a conversation, blah, blah, blah. But then, when you look closer at what's really happening, it's not that that's not happening. It's just that turns out to be an approximation of something that so utterly transcends that description as being accurate as to render it absurd. It doesn't cancel it. It doesn't mean we're not sitting here having a conversation. It just means when you look very closely at what you're referring to, when you say we, when you say here, when you say having a conversation, you discover it's very, very weird phenomena that is absolutely indescribable.
So is karma a residue then?
No, it's usually understood as being that, and this is the problem. It's a misunderstanding to hold karma as a residue, because then I'm stuck in my karma. It's like I'm stuck in my history. I'm stuck in my.
How does that end?
Well, I'll explain to you. This is what I'm saying. You're apparently stuck in your life. You're apparently you. You're stuck being you. You've always been you. You're going to continue to be you. You have your general body that's more or less the same as it was yesterday, and it's going to be more or less the same tomorrow. And you have your patterns of engagement, which are going to continue. People that recognized you yesterday are going to probably recognize you tomorrow, and so on and so forth. And all of this stuff seems to be playing out in a more or less protracted soap opera or whatever, right? And this is the ordinary idea of what would be called karma or residue. It's sort of a long chain of events that you're stuck in. And what I'm saying is that it's not that that's not true as far as it goes. It's describably true. Yeah, sure. I am Peter Brown, and I have all the facts and figures that you could say about me and my life are relatively true. Sure, yeah. I live in California, and I know such and such people, and they know me, and blah 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 blah. That's the whole deal. But, and again, it's not that that's not true, but it's not the whole truth. So that's a little opening. It's not the whole truth. So then you begin to look at, well, what is this not the whole truth? So if there's more than that that's not included in that story, what is it? And you begin to look at that, like we've been playing with today, these kinds of experiments. You look at the way in which things are more than that description, and you discover, wow, yeah, they are more. There's stuff that just does not fitting into that. I'm more than I think I am, or whatever. And then you look closer at that, and you discover even more. And you look closer at that more, and you discover even more. And basically, the moreness, the stuff that is beyond that particular description, turns out to be so huge and vast that it just dwarfs the description into a tiny, 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 a small toenail clipping of in the entire galaxy of phenomena. So the truth of karma, the truth of the patterns, the truth of the facts of your life, the details of your life and your history, are true, but they're tiny, tiny, tiny approximate descriptions of something that is vast and nonlinear and dynamic and completely unstable and creative and actually beyond space and time and so on and so forth.
So in your view of that, is it possible not to create more karma?
Yeah, because
what's the prerequisite for that?
Well, you see that karma that's being created, or that's called, let's not use that word, let's use the word experiential patterning. How's that? Can you follow that? Experiential patterning? So there seems to be all these patterns, right? And there's always patterns, and there's always going to be more patterns. But the patterns are actually very, very dynamic. We're used to thinking of them as stable, but they're actually very, very dynamic if you look very closely. So, if I look at my experience in my hand now, it looks like this, and now 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 it looks like this. So which one is my hand? Oh, it's just my hand. It's just here. It's always here. It's just moving around. But my hand moving around is a euphemism for a range of completely different, unique shapes that are appearing concretely in the case of visual experience. And the same argument applies to any experience. The experience of any pattern. For example, what you're seeing right now, you have never seen before. None of it, right? You're seeing people you know, maybe. Some people you recognize from yesterday. You're seeing your own body, you're looking down, you see your knees, all this stuff. But you can say, I'm seeing my knees, I saw my knees yesterday, I'm going to see my knees tomorrow. But the exact experience of the exact way your knees look at the moment, the angle of vision, the light that's on them, everything like that, has never happened before in your experience and will never happen again in your experience. So even though it's patterned, if you don't look very closely, it's just my knee, it's going to look pretty much the same tomorrow and pretty much the same yesterday, but that's an argument that is full of holes, because in actuality, my knee has never looked exactly like this. Never.
Right then. So if we assert and we attach the idea that the knee that's the same knee I saw yesterday or a moment ago, then is that residual karma accumulating upon itself?
No, it's insanity that recreates itself from moment to moment. Because the knee is not the same knee, and claiming that they say the experience of the knee is not the same knee, and there is no knee apart from the experience of the knee. When you go to sleep at night, where's your knee? When you're dreaming, where's your knee?
When I'm awake, where's my knee?
Yeah, sure, exactly. And when you notice that fact, you discover, the knee isn't a knee that's sitting there. That's an idea. The real knee is the experience of the knee, and that's something that comes and goes. Sometimes it's not there at all when you go to sleep or when you're involved in something. Say you're in a heated argument with somebody. How present is your knee? Unless you got a pain in it, you won't even know it's there, right? Or unless it happens to be in your field of vision and so on. So it's a matter of looking at what experience actually is versus relating to it in terms of what we're thinking of as being. Well, of course my knee's there, it's always there, and my whole body's here. And it's like, okay, that's an interpretive framework, and it's not untrue. It's fine as far as it goes, but it's very sloppy. Because when I look closely, my body is actually, when I say my body, I'm actually referring to the experience of my body, and the experience of my body never repeats itself twice. It's completely unstable, completely unique. There was a time when I was this tall. There was a time when I was, I weighed 40 pounds. There was a time when I was, young and strong, et cetera, et cetera. And what happened? Where'd that go? Well, there was a time when I looked the way I did yesterday. Where'd that go? There was a time when I looked the way I did 2 minutes ago. Where's that gone? It's gone utterly. It's never going to happen again. My experience is never going to look like it did 2 minutes ago. Never. Never going to come again. And even in that instance, it was that way only once. And that was my body then. And when I go to sleep at night and my body disappears, that's my body then. And when I'm dreaming and I'm, whatever body or not appears in the dream, that's my body then. So which one's my body? Where's my body? It's actually very fluid, very dynamic, coming and going, very unstable. But it's possible to not see it that way. If you're locked into an interpretive framework, which we were talking about yesterday, is basically an insanity. It's a common insanity because most everyone is doing it all the time, right? So we're very familiar with it. But to think things are different than the experience of them, to hold that they exist outside of experience, is just a fantasy. It's an assertion. It's like a faith. I have faith. Like let's take the objective world. That's a good one. That's what we're really talking about here. Like I have faith that an objective world exists, and it's basically the same going on by the laws of physics, and it's just sitting here right now, not doing a lot except for like the quantum phenomena or buzzing or whatever. But they don't do too much except for the cosmic ray shooting through them, and I can't see them, so who gives a shit? So this is a nice thing of faith. So here's the objective world, but how do I know there's an objective world? Well, I experience it. Okay, so all of a sudden I'm not talking about an objective world, I'm talking about my experience. So the objective world then is just an interpretive framework that I'm imagining applies to my experience. Now it may or may not, but I can't know whether it does because the only thing I can explore is my experience. So am I stuck in the objective world or not? I can be stuck in...
No, because all experience is released in the moment.
Yes, exactly. And you can notice this fact, and when you notice it, you can feel it, and when you feel it, you feel very unstuck. You feel the fluidity of it. Or you can not notice it, and you can feel stuck. I'm stuck in my circumstances, I'm stuck in my history, I'm stuck in all this stuff. You can feel stuck, but it's like a kind of hypnosis. Because you can also look at the actual complete fluidity and uniqueness of your experience moment to moment, and you can feel that, and all of a sudden you're feeling complete fluidity, you're feeling complete unstuckness, complete flow.
So seeing the irresolvability of all of my experience,
yes,
is that the radiance, or is that another way to express that's the radiance of an experience? Because things...
Don't worry about what you call it, just see the truth of it. That's kind of what I mean by radiance, but don't worry about the terminology. That's just trying to find another map. You don't need a map because you got the thing itself. You don't need the instructions for how to swim. You got the ocean, jump in. And it'll show you how to swim.
It seems to me, or is the karma really just another word for the word focusing you used yesterday?
That's an aspect of it, sure.
It seems to me that as the focusing became more diffuse and less focused, your karma would seem to change.
Sure, absolutely. Focus is an important part of the creation of karma, and it can also be an important part of freeing yourself from apparent karma, from thinking that you're stuck in karma. It's really all about looking at the way patterning really works. And what we call karma, or feeling stuck in circumstances or whatever, is basically a misunderstanding of the way patterning really works. When you see the way patterning really works, you see, there's a shitload of patterning here. There's this unlimited patterning. Just in take your field of vision alone, how much information is there? It's like, bang, it would swamp the world's biggest supercomputer. And yet, it's all, it's not stuck in being that, because it is that effortlessly, it's that spontaneously, it's that instantaneously, and it's that with absolute instability, because whatever it looks like it's already gone, and it's never going to come again. So it's continually disappearing. It's like a cartoon character that's walking along a cliff that's continually disappearing as they move along, and continually appearing every time I put your foot down, it's like there's your ground, and then you raise your foot and the ground's gone. That's kind of what experience is like. It's continually, or in Dzogchen they have this wonderful image, it's like writing on water. Right? You can write your name on water. But where is it? It's nowhere except in that instant of your writing, the contact of your finger with water. And yet you can pretend I wrote my name. And you can even see yourself doing it, and you can see that it's your name. But in the actuality, if you look closely, it's just an instantaneous uniqueness that never repeats and has no tie-in with anything else. So And that's patterning. That is patterning. That's what patterning really is. So patterning is really unpatterned. That's weird. It's paradoxical. Hey, weird and paradoxical is a good sign that you're being with actuality. If it seems to be a little bit not weird or a little bit not paradoxical, it seems to make a little sense, that's a really good sign you're in an interpretive framework which is imaginary, untrue, unreal, and liable to be confusing. Okay, yes.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
No, go ahead. It just, that's the unresolvability of the idea that there's the patterning and the patternlessness are not mutually exclusive.
Right.
They're there at the same time.
They're one and the same.
So the karma is there, and there's no karma there.
Yeah.
The sleeping before sleep, when sound comes in, the sound it's not that, as you say, the sound was added.
Yeah.
It's almost everything we've kind of touched on so far this morning is that kind of the multi-dimensionality of it's is it a particle or is it a wave? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And none of the above.
Yeah, right.
It's a particle, it's a wave, it's a blender, it slices, it dices, and it can be yours for only $19.99.
Yeah.
Operators are standing by.
And it's the tendency to, well, is it that? Is it my karma, or is it a sea of an ocean with no waves? No, it's both and
It's both and weirder.
Yeah,
It's
more another.
It's more another. It is. Yeah, it's this, it's that, it's the other, and none of it's not that, and it's all of that, and it's something else entirely.
Yeah.
And
it never departs from itself. Meanwhile, yeah.
Endless weirdness.
Endless weirdness.
If it's not endless weirdness, then you're in an interpretive framework, which is fine. Nothing wrong with interpretive frameworks. But if you don't notice you're in an interpretive framework, it can feel stuck. It can feel small. It can feel entrapping. It can feel incomplete. It can feel unluscious. And there's no need to ever feel small or incomplete or unluscious because those conditions don't actually exist except in imagination.
And that's
inconceivable fullness is the only thing that actually exists.
And that's why death is here now.
Yeah.
Deep sleep is here now.
Yeah.
Karma is here now.
Because what those are is this.
Yeah.
And those are just apparitions of this. And this is independent. What this is independent of what it looks like.
Right.
This looks like waking state, us having a conversation.
Right.
If you all of a sudden passed out and went to sleep, it would be the same thing that would look like sleep. It wouldn't even look like you being in sleep because there'd be no you anymore.
Right.
But it's actually the same thing. And it looks like you and your thoughts and your localization is just a magic show.
Yeah. And that's why focus comes into it, because you can choose to see the Rorschach as the car or just the dots.
Yeah.
And it's not that one goes away or the other.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. This is an interesting point, and this is part of the whole thing of the participatory aspect of it. The experimental aspect of it is you have a certain mobility, you have a certain navigability. You can kind of tune in and tune out and be with this in various different ways to some extent. And of course, don't worry about that. You can't say how you're doing that or how that happens or what that is, because you can't say how you do anything or what anything is. So it's it's same old. But if you play with it, you'll discover that this is so. You'll discover just to a certain degree you can, change focus. You can notice this. You can move into something. You have a certain mobility. You can kind of navigate or surf or do hyperspace travel or however you want to describe it within this transcendental, openness of experience, and be with it in various different ways. In other words, you're not stuck in it. You can zoom in and zoom out. Like the little experiment we did when we were sitting here and look at your field of vision. Feel your field of vision. Feel the presence of sound. You feel the presence of thought. You can do that to some extent, right? And this is a mechanism for checking the stuff out for yourself instead of just, well, geez, that's an interesting idea. It's cool. My next seminar is next week. I got to run. It's like, well, check it out. Look at this. It's not like this is how it is. It's like this is an opportunity for you to see for yourself how it is, and this is what I found. And looking for yourself, see what you find.
Can I ask one more thing? That there, something that I've been playing with recently, because there was a kind of an initial default of, okay, noticing's happening, oh cool, the patternlessness is there.
Yeah.
And then I started to now play with the idea of, once I find myself open to that patternlessness in the noticing,
Right.
now I purposely choose to create the car. I'll pick something and I'll make the pattern of it, just so that I can feel the difference between the holding something, whatever that mechanism is that holds something to be something and then lets something go, hold something to be something, and that back and forthness tells me something about each side.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And these are all common modes.
Right.
You know, typically in the beginning of this yoga, the great thrill is get away from the patterns. You know, go into the openness, go into the transcendence, go into the nothingness, go into the weirdness, which is it's quite appropriate because it's wow, this is different, this is fun, and after you build up some chops in that mode and you develop some skill in that mode, and that's kind of where you're hanging out, then you begin to look around. Well, what other options are there here? Well, how about forms? Maybe go into forms. And you discover that you have, because you can go anywhere, you can be with this in any different, we call it a frame of reference or focus or whatever, that you can, and there's no hierarchy. It's not like one thing's better than another. It's just a matter of playing with it to discover its range, to discover its possibilities. And we're all very familiar with forms. We're all very familiar with, this is this and that's that, and you're you and I'm me, and that's human normalcy. So so the first rush is getting out of that, and wow, God, there's all of this unbelievable transcendental openness and weirdness, and okay, cool, yeah, that's there. You can go there whenever you want. It's right here. Mm-hmm. This is it. But that's not the only game in town, because there's always more and other. Mm-hmm. You can go to openness, and you can start playing around with closenesses. Let me find some closenesses and play around with that. And let me find some stucknesses and play around with that. Let me find some this and play, because they're all the same thing. They're just different modes of what this is, of this actuality.
Yeah.
And there's actually no hierarchy. Right. It's all this, or as I would put it, it's all radiant presence. Mm-hmm. And can it look like, having an argument with your wife and getting pissed off at each other? Sure. Can it look like tripping on the infinity? Sure. Can it look like, whatever? Sure. And does it ever actually become better or worse? No. It's just more endless weirdness. Oh, yeah. It can look like anything, but it never departs from itself. It's always just this. Yeah. Never departs from being just this, what's right here, right now. When you die, it will look very different. It's going to be just this.
And there's just something about hanging out in that interface between it being a face and it being a vase.
Yeah.
Even though at the first you look at it and go, well, actually, it has to. I can't see both the face and the vase at the same time, and you kind of see that little mind trick. But then, deeper into that, you actually go, no, there is a little something, a little cobbling ephemeral cobbling together that I see the thing do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then you can go, it's not a face or a vase. Right. And it's a face and a vase, or just a face, or just a... It's like, it's infinitely multitaskable. It's infinitely flexible. It's like your computer. If you had like the mega computer of the dreams, you could have as many windows open as you want. Right. And no one is better or worse than another. You can have some stupid kids game open, you can have some amazing, scientific discourse open, you can have some porn open, you can have this open, you can have that open. It's like, it's just weird energy patterns on a screen. And that's all it is. There's nothing actually happening. There's nothing actually happening here. Move along, folks. There's nothing happening here. Nothing to see. Why don't we take a 5-minute break, and then we can hang out for another half hour or so, and then a break for lunch? Does that feel good? Or we could break for lunch early if you guys want to knock off, but I kind of feel like we're just sort of getting rolling.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Okay, let's take a short break, and then we can hang out for another half hour or something.
From anyway.
So, where were we? Where are we?
Nothing.
Where is anything?
On Einstein's law of
What is anything?
Here, where's here?
Yes.
So, when we kind of get caught up in our, I don't know, when we get caught up in our
Right.
crap,
Sure.
when we get caught up in our crap, when we get caught up in a pattern,
Right.
like something holds our attention
Right.
too long, yeah, it's helpful to continue doing these exercises where we just either start to focus on sound, feeling, like sight, you know,
Yes, it can be helpful. A couple of things I want to say about that. First of all, it's probably most productive, particularly at first, to do these exercises more when you don't need to, when it's easier. So when you're just sort of relaxed and having fun and chilled out and everything's sort of spacing out, that's the best time to hit these kind of exercises. And then when you're caught up and in the thick of it, typically it's easier to just, okay, I'm screwed, I'm in this. But sooner or later you'll come out of it and then you'll be relaxed again. Because when you develop more experience with being with your experience in fresh ways, it will tend to spontaneously apply across the board. So that's the one thing. And the second thing is, it's a very subtle but a very insidious trap to use these exercises and this exploration as an antidote. You're not fixing something. When you use these things to fix a problem, like, oh my God, I'm caught up, I have to get out of it, so let me do this to getting caught up in it. You're actually just creating another headache. You're creating another fixation. This is about letting go of orientations, not about finding an orientation that's going to solve some orientation. And when you play it off into a game like that, you actually are reinforced. It's like throwing gasoline on what you're thinking of as a problem. Another way to put this is, when something is a problem that needs to be fixed, just holding that it's a problem that needs to be fixed, and especially trying to fix it, is asserting that even more. You're asserting that it matters. You're saying, God, this matters. This really matters, and I need to fix it. And the problem with any state of mind is more thinking it matters than what it happens to look like. So when you try and fix something, you're making it matter more. And the more you're making it matter, the more you're actually throwing gasoline on the fire. So the best thing to do when you're in the thick of it, when you're sort of caught up and stuff, is to just laugh. Just throw back your head and say, oh boy, am I fucked, just wow, whatever, right? And just sort of let go, be loose. And in that looseness, you're actually depriving it of steam, because you're not telling yourself, in fact, you're not saying it just matters. I have to do something about this, I have to fix it. You're saying it matters, which is feeding it. You're making it bigger. It feels like you're trying to get out of it, but you're actually making it bigger. So it's a subtle thing. It's like think of tug of war, okay? You're pulling and someone else is pulling on the rope, right? It's like, God, I have to win this, I have to pull harder, pull harder, pull harder. You pull harder, they pull harder, and you're stuck holding onto the rope. The way to win is let go of the damn rope. Just let go. Then winning or losing doesn't matter anymore. So likewise, when you depressurize the situation by letting go of it, is when you take the steam out of it, which is actually the solution to being caught up in things. So it's very paradoxical. Trying to fix things is making them worse. Not trying to fix them and just surrendering to it, letting go, going with the flow, is actually fixing them. So it's all ass backwards.
like a Tai Chi reverse.
Yeah. So you can play with that. But in general, especially for beginners, you have to feel for yourself where you're at and how things are working for you. It's probably best to do these kinds of exercises when it's easy, when you're set up for it, when you're just relaxed and chill and spacing out, and it's in the evening and nothing's on and you're not caught up in anything. That's a good time to sort of have fun. And when you do that, doing it then will tend to percolate through all of your experience. So do it when it's easy, do it in ways that are easy, and it will be powerful and it will apply ultimately into the times that you kind of need it more. But doing it when you need it is actually does the opposite of what you expect it to do, because you're actually trying to solve a problem, which is giving the problem more importance, which is getting you stucker. Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's all, as with everything, it's all very paradoxical and weird. But paradoxical and weird is it's a sign that you might be on the right track, right? Paradoxical, weird, and makes no sense. It's like, oh yeah, great. I'm on it. Here's your experience. Your experience is right here, right? Feel the presence of your experience. Feel how it's actually here. Feel the here-ness of your experience. Don't trance out. Don't like go into do any histrionics. Just feel the actuality. Well, you rich people have carte blanche.
You're exempt.
So just feel the presence of your experience. Feel it. It's present. Feel how your experience is present. How is it present? What does present mean? Don't answer the question. You can't answer it, but feel the way it's here. You feel. You can take a little inventory. You can notice. Field of vision is present. Field of hearing, field of sound is present. Field of touch is present. It's just here, right? It's just where it is. How is it here? What does that mean? What does it mean for it to be present? What does it mean for it to be here? And you can't answer that question, but just feel how it actually is present. It's not an idea that it's present. It really is here. What is that? How is that? What's that made of? What's this isness made of? What's this presence made of? It's palpable. You can feel the presence of experience. It's actually here. We're not used to paying much attention to this, of course. But what is this? What is this presence? Notice how experience is always full. It's never lacking anything. You feel the vision is always full of light. If you close your eyes, feel the vision is still full of light. It's the light changes its character a lot. It becomes these little tiny myriads of minuscule little flashes of light or slight patterns or whatever. But it's still full. And then you open your eyes and it's full. It's not only fuller when your eyes are open and closed, it just looks different. The sense of the field of touch, the field of sensation is always full. Always changing, but it feels like, but it never actually gains, it never actually gets fuller or less full. Field of hearing is always full. You can be sitting in an absolutely quiet, silent room, but it's not a lack. It's not like there's anything missing in the field of hearing. Smell and taste always full. Thought. There's always thought present. Even if you're not thinking very actively, there's always some energy, some dynamism present in that bandwidth, in that textural dimension of thought. So look at your field of vision. Here it is sitting here, sort of a big sideways egg-shaped field of light. Right here, look at the actual thing. Look at the edges. When you get near the edges of your field of vision, it kind of gets sort of dim and gray and kind of fuzzy, right? Try and get as close as you can to the edge of your field of vision with your awareness. Just notice what it's like at the very edge of your field of vision. And just sort of feel the full presence of the full field of vision, the full sort of sideways oval that's sitting here, just full of light, with all these colors and patterns and everything present in it. And notice how that is full of light, and look at where your thought happens. The field of thought, the mind is full of thought energy, even if whether it's active or not. Where is the thought happening compared to where the field of vision is? Where is it? Where are they? They don't get in each other's way, do they? They sort of happen in slightly different dimensions. You can't find exactly where the field of thought's happening because it's not a space. It's not spatial, simply, but It's where it is, and the field of vision is where it is and doesn't get in any way. Now, so here's your field of vision sitting here, your field of thought sitting here. Where's the field of hearing sitting? Where is it? Where's it located relative to the field of vision and the field of thought? It's not really spatial. It's not like it's, a few feet behind the vision or anything like that. But they don't get in each other's way. They coexist in their own little bandwidth or their own dimension or something, right? And they don't step on each other's toes. They don't get in each other's way. When sound is present, nothing happens. Nothing gets any less in the field of vision. When thought is present, nothing gets any more or less in any of the other sense fields. Right? Now, where's all this happening? Here's your field of vision floating. Where is it? Where's it floating? What's it in? What's it on? What's holding it up? What's it sitting on? Where is it? It's here, but where is here? Where is that? Just feel, you can't answer these questions, but just sort of feel it. Feel where is here? What's your field of vision in? What's your field of hearing in? What sort of a space are they in? What's that space like that they're in? Just sort of feel it. Just play around with it. Feel the texture of the experience. Feels like something, doesn't it? Feels like everything. But it has a feeling, doesn't it? It's rich, it's palpable, it's luscious. And it's present. Feel that presence. It's so present, it's so close. There's no distance between you and your experience, is there? Your experience is in you. It couldn't be any closer. You're completely intimate with it. You're completely intimate with your vision, right? Look at the way that's so. Completely intimate with hearing, completely intimate with thought. Absolutely engaged, without any effort at all, spontaneously. It just keeps appearing spontaneously and effortlessly. Keeps shining forth in this presence. Feel the way in which that's so. It's not an idea, it's not a word. This is really here. And the way in which it's here is very interesting. How is this here? How is this experiential field here? Just feel it. Of course you can't answer these questions, but you can just feel it and play with it. Just because you can't answer the questions doesn't mean you can't learn a lot about it just by being sensitive with it, feeling it and being with it. So find the edges of your field of vision, it sort of fades out and gets a little fuzzy way out towards the edges, sort of where you can't really see anything. Now what's a little outside that? So you go a little, feel what's there, what's outside your field of vision, what's there? And then move your attention back inside the field of vision and feel what's there, feel what vision feels like. And then go right to the edge, feel what the edge of the field of vision feels like. Kind of gray and fuzzy. And just go a little bit farther. Just on the edge, just outside the field of vision. What's that feel like? What's there? So here's your field of vision sitting here, right? In the middle of everything. Find where your field of thought is, where the thinking's happening. Its own little aurora borealis bandwidth. Now what's in between the field of thought and the field of vision? Just feel if you can feel what's there. Is there anything there? What's it like? You can't answer the question. It's not like you can say or anything, but just sort of feel. Feel the presence of the field of vision, how it's present. It's here, it's concretely present, it's very obvious. It's not an idea that it's present, it's completely, blatantly factual. It is present. Feel the way the field of sensation, the field of touch is present. They're the same presence, aren't they? The field of vision is present, the field of touch is present, exactly the same presence, the same here-ness, the same isness. What is that isness? What is that here-ness? Just try and feel what it is. What is it like? We don't usually pay much attention to that. It's just a constant and we don't give it much attention. But what is this here-ness? What is this isness? It's something, it's not nothing. It's very palpable. Feel this presence. And this presence is the same presence. All your experience is the same presence, right? Look and see if that's so. Vision is present, thought is present, hearing is present, touch is present, so on and so forth. It's all the same presence. And all that presence is full of qualities. Vision is full of what we call light, hearing is full of what we call sounds, mind is full of what we call thought. It's all these amazing radiant characteristics, all these experiential characteristics that unceasingly, spontaneously show up, filling all of these experiential fields. Just feel the way that happens. It's like continually being filled with this shining forth of all these experiential characteristics, all this light, all this sound, all this thought, all this subtle vibes, subtle flavors, moods. It's like a sea, it's like an orchestra or a symphony of qualities, inconceivable fullness and subtlety and dynamism. It's no work at all. It does itself. It's just continually shining forth. Right? Always full. Just feel the presence of that symphony experience. How it does itself. Then feel. Is there anything else? Is there anything missing?
Taste.
This is present. That's part of the symphony. Everything's here. This palpable presence, this is not an abstraction, this presence of experience is full, always spontaneously full of the radiance of experiential characteristics. Light, shape, sound, color, ideas, moods, vibes, taste, smells, all these qualities. Always full, never lacking. Always with no stability whatsoever. Continually changing spontaneously. Just notice the way that's so. Anytime you want, you can just sort of let go and tune into the symphony and just feel it wafting through this field of presence. It does itself. It never stops. You can't stop it if you want to. You go to sleep, it's still going on. It changes its form. It looks different, but it doesn't become any less. When you go to sleep, you don't feel like anything's disappearing, like you're losing anything, like there's anything missing, is it? When you go to sleep, it's still a fullness, right? Waking experience is full. Sleep experience looks very, very different, but it's still full. Right? When you go to sleep, you don't feel like, oh, I'm losing the world. Oh no, it's disappearing. It disappears, but it's still a fullness, isn't it? It's a nice, comfortable, easy fullness. And then you start dreaming, it's still full. And you wake up, still full. Continues to change shape forever, never repeats itself. Always presenting with all these different patternings, unendingly, infinitely. But it's always full. Spontaneously shining forth, spontaneously doing itself. And this actuality, this actual presence of the radiant field of your experience is reality. And what it is, and the way in which it is what it is is astounding, it's amazing, it's miraculous. And you can tune into it and very directly discover that fact, the way it is, anytime you want. And this is what I call the yoga of radiant presence. And simply doing that little tuning in, just that little noticing the actuality of what is here, just non-verbally. You don't even need to shut. You can still be thinking a mile a minute, arguing with yourself and all kinds of things. It doesn't matter. But because it doesn't stop this presence, all these qualities showing up. It doesn't stop the symphony. It's just another melody in the symphony. But feeling that is completely transforming, because what this is and the way in which it is what it is drastically and radically other than what we're used to thinking it is. And by tuning into this, you discover that fact and the implications of that and what that feels like can and will drastically reorient what you feel like what you feel yourself to be, what you feel your life to be, what you feel the world to be. So that's our experiment. And these kinds of experiments are essentially hypnotic. It's following it's following suggestion in being with your experience in different ways. But all navigation of experience is essentially hypnotic. When you think you're directing your attention, or when you think you're paying attention to something, it's basically a mechanism of hypnosis. Or it's essentially similar. It's what hypnosis actually is that does that.
I don't really know what you mean by hypnosis.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of targeting experience along a focus. And the focus can be conceptual, or it can be any kind of a thing. In the case of that kind of a narration, it's obviously verbal cues. I mean, all conversation is essentially hypnotic. Someone says something to you, and them saying something to you forces your mind to some extent to form some kind of a picture of what you think they're saying. So they send a hypnotic meme to you, which your consciousness spontaneously organizes around, which enables you to then say something back, which does the same thing with them, and so on and so forth. But when we're alone, the same thing is happening. When you think of something, or when when your attention wanders or something, it's essentially the same mechanism. It's the way experience navigates within itself through this sort of selecting of focuses, foci, and which becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of experience tending to simulate that in some way. For the past 3x whatever days, we've been exploring this. Hopefully, if nothing else, some sense of the astounding, amazing possibility of what is available in experience, if one takes the trouble to look a little bit closer, has been communicated. And I encourage you to play with this and have fun with it, because it proves to be extremely valuable. The value may not be apparent at first. Maybe at first there's a kind of a fun factor, or a giddy, trippy, get high factor of, whoa, this is kind of cool. But ultimately, this exploration of and discovery that experience is different and ultimately inconceivably different than we're used to thinking it to be, has far-ranging implications and impact on your sense of yourself and your sense of your world and the general fulfillment, satisfaction, and multidimensional engagement with your life. And this is the reality of what spirituality is. Whether you're being spiritual or not, in terms of what you're doing, activities and how society classifies them, the real bare bones essence of what actual spirituality is nothing other than this progressive opening to what this is, what you are, which ultimately is what has been called enlightenment and liberation and so on and so forth. And more to the point, every step of opening to this is itself enlightenment, because it's not like you open to it a little bit, but there's so much more over there. There is so much more, but the so much more is in every little bit, fractally. And of course this becomes clearer and clearer. The weirdness of this becomes clearer and clearer as you begin to flirt with this stuff. But anyway, all of that's irrelevant, all these classifications and measurements and am I enlightened yet or not, is completely absurd. The point is that the engagement itself is its own reward, is its own value, and it proves to be cumulative and transformative and wonderful. So, it doesn't matter. I mean, the nice thing about this, it doesn't matter how you engage with it. You're engaging with the real thing. Anywhere. Any aspect of it is it. Any aspect of it, any tiny little fragment of your actual experience is transcendental reality. And so just playing with that is itself intrinsically an opening. When the eye is single, the entirety is filled with light. The yoga of radiant presence is the discovery of the substance of your experiencing and realizing the absolute inclusiveness of the ongoing intrinsic transcendental engagement with that. This substance, radiant presence, is entirely transcendental, i.e. is entirely beyond conceiving of, specifying, defining, locating, and so on, and yet is the concrete stuff that every aspect of experience whatsoever entirely consists of, so is being ongoingly engaged with absolute nakedness and intimacy, as the presence of your actual experience. This being the case, this substance is noticeable, discoverable, investigable, explorable, and knowable. Since the faculty by which all of this investigation is effected is it itself, this faculty has the absolutely transcendental nature intrinsic to the substance. So the transcendentality of the substance is no impediment to the transcendental intelligence of the knowing, and it can be fully known. Presence indicates the actuality, the real being of this substance, and radiant indicates its inherent nature of spontaneously generating infinite apparent experiential characteristics, all this stuff, and implications, as well as their intrinsic apprehension as what we call experience. The yoga consists of first noticing, then coming to fully realize that there is in actuality nothing that has, there is an action. Maybe if there was some light up here I could actually. Who wrote this? The yoga consists of first noticing, then coming to fully realize that there is in actuality nothing and has never been or will ever be anything other than this condition of absolutely inclusive, transcendental, intrinsic engagement of radiant presence with itself.